Hello and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Thursday, May 22nd. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Jon Elmer, Asa Winstanley, and Tamara Nassar. Ali Abunimah is traveling this week. It's day 594 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Coming up, we'll talk to Franck Magennis, a barrister with Garden Court Chambers and a member of the Haldane Society of Socialist Lawyers, about his work challenging repression and breaches of civil rights by the British and other states over Palestine solidarity protests. We'll also have Ali Abunimah on as a guest from Dublin, Ireland, to talk about the massive anti-genocide protests taking place amid a renewed popular push for the government in Dublin to finally enact the Occupied Territories Bill, banning trade with Israeli settlements. Ali will be joined by a special guest. Later on in the program, Jon will bring us the latest resistance news from Gaza, including a complex ambush in 𝐄𝐥𝐿𝐈 as Yemeni forces expand their missile attacks on Israel to include the port of Haifa. But first, let's take a look at the news. Here's a brief summary of some of the latest developments this week in Palestine. Israeli attacks across Gaza have killed more than 700 Palestinians over the last 7 days, according to the latest figures from the Palestinian Health Ministry, as starvation continues to spread after more than 80 days of Israel's blockade. At least 160 were killed in a 24-hour period on Sunday, May 18th alone, including at least 40 in a massacre targeting displacement tents in Khan Yunis. In Jabalia, Beit Lahia, and Gaza City in northern Gaza, Israeli airstrikes killed more than 200 Palestinians in the 48-hour period between Friday, May 16th, and Saturday, May 17th, according to the Gaza government media office. Quote, "This is a series of ongoing massacres accompanied by the complete or partial destruction of more than 1,000 housing units, the redestruction of what was already destroyed, and the forced displacement of more than 300,000 citizens to the already stricken Gaza City, which lacks any infrastructure to accommodate this massive number of forcibly displaced persons," the media office stated. Among the martyrs, 140 remain under the rubble as a result of the Israeli occupation army's deliberate denial of access to the bombed areas in northern Gaza, the office added. The Israeli attacks in northern Gaza, what it is calling Operation Gideon's Chariots, is, quote, "transforming the area into an open and systematic killing zone." Israeli drones have also focused on burning hundreds of tents designated for sheltering displaced persons in the Tal al-Zatar area of Jabalia Camp, Beit Lahia, and other areas in the north, amidst suspicious international silence and the active complicity in the ongoing genocide. The siege on North Gaza has accelerated in recent days. Mahmoud Sharbawi, a young man in Jabalia, filmed himself hiding from Israeli quadcopter shooting on Tuesday, May 20th.
I am now in Jabalia camp and I am trapped by Israeli quadcopters. It's shooting us.
The United Nations Humanitarian Office stated that on May 19th, an Israeli airstrike hit a school in Nuseirat in central Gaza, killing 7 people, including 2 teachers who worked for the United Nations Agency for Palestine Refugees. On Tuesday, the Israeli military issued further displacement orders affecting 26 neighborhoods in northern Gaza, specifically in Beit Lahia, Jabalia, and its refugee camp, the UN said. The affected area spans about 35 square kilometers and represents 10% of the Gaza Strip. Humanitarian partners estimate that as of midday Tuesday, more than 41,000 people were displaced. About 81% of all of Gaza's territory now falls within Israeli militarized zones or has been placed under displacement orders, the UN said on Wednesday. In Khan Yunis, in southern Gaza, the Israeli military issued displacement orders for 90% of the city area. Hind Khurari of Al Jazeera reported on May 19th that, quote, "We saw people evacuating under fire, holding whatever they could carry, and the Israeli forces told those Palestinians to evacuate to Al-Mawasi in Khan Yunis, which, she adds, has been targeted continuously by Israeli forces." She says, quote, "There has been ongoing attacks by artillery shelling, quadcopters, drones, and airstrikes across the Gaza Strip in areas like northern Gaza, Gaza City, Nuseirat, Deir Balah, and Khan Yunis. The situation continues to escalate, and Palestinians are left with no choices, no options, no places to go. Everywhere they go, they're still going to be targeted," she reported. That same day, May 19th, Israeli commandos disguised as Palestinian civilians shot and killed a man and detained his wife and child during a raid on a house in Khan Yunis. Al Jazeera reported that Israeli forces drove a civilian vehicle and raided the home as airstrikes pounded the surrounding area, residents said. Mahmoud Safi, a relative of the family, said that Israeli troops carried what appeared to be luggage and blankets on the top of their vehicle. The assassinated man was identified as Ahmed Sarhan, a leader of the armed wing of the Popular Resistance Committees. At least 5 other people were killed in the raid, in addition to Sarhan, according to medical sources. Donya Abu Sitta, who is a contributor to the Electronic Intifada and has appeared on this live stream, wrote in Drop Site News that, quote, "According to witnesses, they killed Sarhan in front of his family and kidnapped his wife and children and shot dead another child in the street on their way out." Donya witnessed the airstrikes covering for the raid on Sarhan and his family. She reports, quote, "I saw F-16 fighter jets and Apache helicopters flying very close by. So close I felt like I could reach out and touch them. It was the first time I ever witnessed a missile fired from a warplane. I saw the massive orange fireball unleashed as the bomb exploded not far away. The buzzing of the drones overhead was deafening, but the sound of people's screams and wails were even louder. Everyone in the street was scattering hysterically, running for their lives. We live on a block with apartment complexes around a central courtyard, and I saw my neighbors standing by the windows trying to comprehend what was happening. Thick black smoke filled the air. Even though we had endured nearly 600 days of this war of extermination, I didn't believe we would survive this day. It was a living nightmare." Donya added that the Israeli military had carpet-bombed the area, launching over 40 airstrikes in 40 minutes on some accounts. Hospitals continue to be besieged and forced out of service by Israeli attacks. Late Wednesday night, the Israeli military carried out artillery fire targeting northern Gaza's Al-Auda hospital, while drones also bombed water tanks at the health facility, according to Al Jazeera. Israel attacked the Nasser medical complex in Khan Yunis yet again this week, targeting their small warehouse of essential supplies. According to the World Health Organization, around 30% of the warehouse was destroyed. The warehouse was built by the WHO and included critical supplies such as prosthetic limbs, IV fluids, and dialysis solutions. Dr. Munir al-Bursh, Director General of the Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza, said that the damage caused by the Israeli airstrike on the warehouse at Nasser Medical Complex, quote, "comes at a time when the stock levels of more than 45% of essential medicines had already reached zero, and basic medical supplies or those needed for surgical operations had exceeded 60% in shortages, even before this attack." Nasser Medical Complex was attacked last week, as we reported, as Israeli forces assassinated a journalist in a bombing that destroyed the hospital's burn unit. In addition, the Israeli military bombed the European Gaza hospital, also in Khan Yunis, last week. Since then, the hospital has been rendered out of service. I spoke with Dr. Majid Jaber, an emergency room physician at the European Gaza Hospital who survived the bombing and said that it was the last medical facility that was able to provide basic care to cancer patients. And now the entire hospital is out of service following a series of Israeli attacks. You can watch that interview with Dr. Jaber on electronicintifada.net or on YouTube. On May 19th, at the Indonesian hospital in Beit Lahia in northern Gaza, Israeli forces surrounded and besieged the facility as Israeli airstrikes targeted the power generators and fuel tanks to operate the generators, sparking a massive fire. Hospital workers told the United Nations that there were 55 people in the hospital, including patients and medical staff, with critical shortages of food and water. Staff and patients were forced to flee on foot, trying to maneuver gurneys over massive piles of rubble on the destroyed streets. The Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza said that Israel's targeting of electricity generators was a deliberate effort to destroy the capacity of the hospitals. Quote, "The health situation in the northern Gaza Strip is catastrophic after the Indonesian hospital was put out of service," the ministry said, adding that every single hospital in Gaza is suffering from a lack of fuel and spare parts needed for generators. Tom Potokar, a British surgeon working at the Indonesian hospital, recorded this video after the attacks.
Well, it's another day of devastation here in Gaza. The stories coming from the north, absolutely horrific, particularly around the Indonesian hospital, but also in Al-Mawasi area this morning where 36 people were killed in so-called safe zone. We've been operating all morning so far, and all for explosive injuries. One young woman with leg fracture and a shoulder fracture and a large wound on her buttock, who came in yesterday and is not yet aware that everyone in her family was killed in the onslaught. I mean, it's difficult to describe in words what's happening here. The constant sound of bombardment, jets overhead. If Cambodia was the killing fields, then Gaza now is the slaughterhouse.
That was Dr. Tom Potokar. Dr. Ezzeddine Shihab, who also worked at the hospital, wrote on May 18th on Twitter or X, quote, "I no longer go to the Indonesian hospital. What foolishness it is to speak of hospitals in a place where life is no longer preserved, but merely postponed. Once I believed, oh, how bitterly I believed, that the presence of a doctor among the dying was a sacred thing, a last stand against the void. But here, where the void has taken residence in the very walls, what can sanctity do? The hospital is surrounded now, not by men, not by soldiers even, but by machines. Drones humming above like metallic locusts, devoid of soul or pity. They know neither suffering nor mercy. They are the purest expression of obedience without conscience. They circle the building like vultures circling a carcass not yet dead enough. We still work at the clinic, though I no longer know if it's from duty or habit, or some grotesque need to perform life while surrounded by death. We whisper, we disinfect, we bind wounds that will open again. The scalpel, once a tool of healing, now feels like an accomplice. At home, the walls speak in cracks. The roof sags under the pressure of memory. The air smells like dust and grief. My mother tapes the broken windows each day with the care of a priest dressing a corpse. My father rations rice with the reverence of a man offering communion. But outside, it never stops. The bombing continues with the faithfulness of a priest at prayer. It does not pause. It does not tire. It beats like a heart possessed by something inhuman. And now the streets. No, not streets. Corridors of exile. Rows of tents like gravestones made of fabric. Children play in the ashes, unaware that they are survivors of a war not yet finished. The army says, evacuate. To where? They do not say, only leave, disappear, unbecome. Famine grows near, but even hunger with its gnawing cruelty is familiar. Hunger is intimate. It is ours. What is worse, what is unbearable, is the silence that follows the blast. The silence in which you call a name and no one answers. The silence where meaning once lived. This is not a war. It is annihilation dressed in the costume of procedure. It is a logic without soul, a godless arithmetic of bodies and coordinates. And still, some whisper that God watches. I do not know. Sometimes I think he has turned his face away, not out of indifference, but out of shame. But if you are reading this, if your eyes have reached these words like a boat reaching a shore you thought unreachable, then for the love of all things holy and damned, do not look away. To look away is to become part of it. To forget is to bury us before we are dead. To remain silent is to drive the final nail. Those are excerpts of a tweet by Dr. Izzeddin Shahab written on May 18th. Israel announced earlier this week that it was allowing several trucks of humanitarian aid into Gaza after 80 days of complete closure and an engineered humanitarian disaster. However, the Gaza government media office and the United Nations and its partners said Wednesday morning that no trucks had entered since only a handful came in over the weekend. Late Wednesday evening, the media office said that finally trucks had entered carrying various types of aid, but the total number was fewer than 90. Quote, these aid trucks were allocated to a number of international and civil society organizations as part of efforts to distribute them to the Palestinian people to meet some of their urgent humanitarian needs, the media office stated. The 87 trucks that entered Wednesday evening are just a drop in the bucket compared with the staggering need in Gaza. Some 44,000 aid trucks should have entered since March 2nd, when Israel closed the crossings in flagrant violation of all international humanitarian laws. Gaza requires around 500 aid trucks and 50 fuel trucks daily to meet the bare minimum humanitarian needs of its population, the media office stated. The United Nations Humanitarian Office noted that the Israeli authorities are requiring the UN to offload supplies on the Palestinian side of Kerem Abu Salem or Kerem Shalom crossing and reload them separately once they secure UN teams access from inside. Only then is the UN able to bring any supplies closer to where people in need are sheltering. On May 20th, the Gaza Media Office stated that 326 deaths had been recorded due to malnutrition, food and medicine shortages, and more than 300 miscarriages among pregnant women were reported over the last 80 days. The humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip has reached catastrophic levels in every sense of the word, the office stated. Euromed Human Rights Monitor said on May 21st that it had documented the deaths of 26 Palestinians, including 9 children, in just a 24-hour period. Quote, these deaths are the result of a deliberate Israeli policy that weaponizes hunger and denial of treatment to kill Palestinian civilians. The Titan blockade, in place since March 2nd, disproportionately targets the most vulnerable and turns the man-made humanitarian catastrophe into a central tool of extermination. Meanwhile, Israeli lawmakers have been boasting that they are enjoying the destruction of Gaza and are calling for its entire ethnic cleansing, while the so-called international community not just watches, but continues to arm and abet these genocidal war crimes and crimes against humanity. Bezalel Smotrich, the Israeli finance minister, said that Israeli forces intend to, quote, level all of Gaza, just as they leveled Rafah. In remarks to Israeli Army radio this week, Smotrich said that, quote, the Army's operation aims to occupy and cleanse areas in Gaza, and every house we destroy is considered a tunnel in our view. On May 19th, Smotrich gave a speech boasting of Israel's strategy of mass destruction in Gaza, saying the token amount of humanitarian aid is only being allowed in, quote, so the world does not stop us and accuse us of war crimes. The goal, he insisted, is to conquer, clear, and stay until Gaza is dismantled beyond recognition. Jeremy Scahill of Dropsite News analyzed the Israeli government's positions on the humanitarian aid ruse in recent days. Scahill writes, quote, Benjamin Netanyahu has made it clear. His decision to allow a minuscule amount of aid to enter Gaza is a tactical one aimed at quieting international condemnation of Israel's forced starvation of Gaza and to clear the path of a final solution imposed on the Palestinians of Gaza. We're going to take control of all of the Gaza Strip, Netanyahu vowed Monday in a video released by his office announcing that Israel would begin delivering minimal humanitarian aid, food and medicine only. Netanyahu claimed that international pressure, including from pro-Israel Republican U.S. senators and the White House, required the appearance of humanitarian intervention. Quote, our best friends in the world, senators I know as strong supporters of Israel, have warned that they cannot support us if images of mass starvation emerge, he said. They come to me and say, we'll give you all the help you need to win the war, but we can't be receiving pictures of famine, Netanyahu added. To continue the war of annihilation, he asserted, we need to do it in a way that they won't stop us. In a television interview on May 20th, Moshe Feiglin, a high-ranking politician and a former member of the Israeli parliament, also openly expressed genocidal intent. He told Israeli media that, quote, every child, every baby in Gaza is an enemy. The enemy is not Hamas. We need to conquer Gaza and colonize it and not leave a single Gazan child there. There is no other victory, he said. We've published many features on the Electronic Intifada in the last week, but we wanted to highlight excerpts of Gaza's Meshahar Generation by Noor Nabil Diab, writing from Gaza. Noor writes, quote, in this war, when I am bored, I go to sleep. But then I wake up around dawn to a bombardment and I am no longer bored. The explosions are so close that I go deaf for a few minutes, only able to hear a buzz in my ear that spreads all the way to my brain. In these moments after a bombardment, I pass through 3 stages. The first is the silent and frightened stare. I am stunned. I stand up only to sit down again because my legs can no longer carry the weight of my body. I try to process what is happening, but the conscious mind is protective and doesn't want me to pry further. The next stage brings out another coping mechanism, making light of the situation with humor. What a surprise that bombardment was. If my little sister is in the room, we'll say that the explosion was a balloon popping or a car tire. Other times we pretend that the bombardment is no big deal at all. The last is forgetting. I pretend it didn't happen and I go on unfazed. Most days I live in a state of meshahar. Meshahar is a word in Palestinian dialect specific to Gaza that means miserable or terribly unlucky. It's the feeling that bad luck is chasing you all the time. My mom keeps saying that we're a Meshahar generation. We were born when life was collapsing. It describes Palestinians perfectly because war and agony never fail to leave us alone. Israel broke the ceasefire in mid-March, and the war was back, though it was never really over. Over 100 people were killed by Israeli attacks during the ceasefire, and the drones never went away. But with the breaking of the ceasefire came the torturous sirens, the ground shaking, a return to Meshahar. The list of martyrs grew to more than 1,900 in just over a month. It was happening all over again. Israel issued evacuation orders for the Al-Mukhabarat area in Gaza City, where I live with my mother and younger brother. We left for Al-Nasr, another area of Gaza City where my uncle lives. I noticed barely any difference between the 2 areas. There was meshahar all around. In our area, you saw stacked bags and blankets, people carrying their lives in sacks and looking hopeless. In Al-Nasr, people were not evacuating, but they also looked hopeless shopping the empty markets. Sometimes I think that the only beauty that is left in Gaza City is the kind that you create in your own head through your own observations. It is a way to make yourself feel slightly better. I take photos with my phone, a Samsung, and it has helped me see the beauty in Gaza, which, if you train yourself to see it and to look closely, has no limit. Yet now the beauty I find is a different kind, an aching kind. It hides in people's misery, which breaks my heart. It is the sensation of al-fajah, tragedy, the unbearable combination of grief and agony. Those are excerpts from Gaza's Mashahar Generation by Nawar Nabil Diab, writing from Gaza on electronicintifada.net. And finally, as we always do, we wanted to highlight people expressing joy, determination, and resilience across Palestine. Zakaria Sarsak, a 13-year-old boy who has worked as a regular volunteer at the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in Deir Balah, helping paramedics transfer patients and fill IVs, was treated to a sort of a spa day and a new outfit by friends in Gaza this week. Saeed Mohammed, a filmmaker, took this video of Zakaria a few days ago. He jokes that Zakaria is getting married and they wanted to get him all dressed up. Gaza blogger Sana Al-Jamal, who posted the video, says, quote, "In the midst of war, they tried to create a different kind of day for Zakaria. Laughter, a new outfit, and simple, spontaneous moments that felt like joy."
عندهم عرس اليوم بدنا نظبط سكري. تعال نقربها. ايش مالك؟ لف شوف
ايش فيه؟ And that's it for the news roundup. As always, go to electronicintifada.net for much more, especially to read our new features by our brave writers in Gaza. You're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleague Asa Winstanley. Hi, Asa.
Hi, Nora. Thank you for that, as always. That the young boy there, Zakaria Sarsak, was, I'm sure our viewers and listeners, most of them will remember the film that the BBC deleted back in February, called Gaza, How to Survive a War Zone, told from the point of view of children in Gaza. Was, of course, attacked by the Zionists, by the pro-Israel lobby in Britain, which successfully got it withdrawn, and Zakaria was really the main protagonist of the film. He wasn't the narrator, but he was the main protagonist. It's really nice there to see him
Smiling.
Yeah, smiling, exactly. You see him in that film sort of grown old before his time, and like a lot of children all across Palestine. Well, thank you so much for the news, as always, Nora. As Nora said, you're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Asa Winstanley, and I'm here with my colleague Nora, and Ali Abunimah is traveling this week, and we're going to hear from him later in the show. And of course, later in the show as well, we'll have the Resistance Report with Jon Elmer, as always. Now, all over the Western world, supposedly democratic governments seem to be dismantling their own institutions rather than end their complicity in an involvement with Israel's genocide in the Gaza Strip. Peaceful protests of all kind are being repressed. Students are being deported or arrested without charge or warrant. Journalists are being raided. And a major factor in this has been the Israel lobby and how it is abusing the legal systems of the West to attack, ban and criminalize even the smallest expression of solidarity with the Palestinians. But things are not all bleak. Lawyers of conscience are using their skills to defend Palestinians and their supporters. And joining us here today on the live stream to discuss all of this is one of those lawyers working inside the UK legal system. Franck Magennis is a barrister with Garden Court Chambers and a member of the Hadline Society of Socialist Lawyers. His work focuses on challenging rights breaches by the British and other states, employers and landlords. He's got expertise in legal claims connected to Palestinian emancipation from Israeli occupation. Franck, thanks for joining us on the live stream today.
𝐿𝐿𝐿, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So good to have you. Well, let's jump in. There's so much going on in terms of fighting repression to protect, the civil rights of people expressing their disgust with this genocide that is being financed and politically abetted by the West. Last month in Germany, the German government ordered 4 students with foreign citizenships, 2 Irish, 1 Pole, and 1 American, to leave the country. The rationale was that they had attended protests on campus against the Gaza genocide. This, of course, followed the Trump administration in the U.S. ordering immigration police to effectively kidnap without warrant several leaders of student protests from U.S. campuses. What does it say about the climate of repression in Europe that some European states have acted so incredibly fanatically in defense of Israel's genocide?
Well, look, what I would say is that Israel is collapsing and Zionism, its animating ideology, is in a terminal crisis. And so what we see is these kind of morbid symptoms. As the racist colonial ideology of Zionism collapses before our eyes, and if you want to, I can sort of get into details, but your viewers will be familiar with the details, right? It's very obvious to anyone paying attention. Even liberal institutions like the ICJ have had to admit it's an apartheid state, which means it's engaged in racial domination, and even EU countries are accusing the Zionist entity of genocide, right? So that's why I say that it's a terminal crisis, right? That's not my hope or my fantasy. That's just my dispassionate assessment of what's happening. I don't see how it's possible for the Zionist entity to come back from this damage that it's done to its own reputation through its own actions, all right? So we have all of these morbid symptoms of a dead ideology, a dying ideology that's in its kind of death rattle, and it's predictable. There's a sort of, you might call a spectrum of nation states around the world that have responded to the crisis of Zionism in different ways. At one end of that spectrum, you might point to a country like Yemen and Ansar Allah, who have frankly shamed the rest of the world by their willingness to stand in solidarity with the Palestinians at this very dark hour for them, right? Taking real material sacrifices to militarily confront the Zionist entity and to show solidarity, to open up a front in the struggle against Zionism. And then you pass through that spectrum. Countries like South Africa, of course, have done very useful stuff, and their foreign minister is saying, if you are a dual Israeli national who served in that colonial military, you come back to this country, we will arrest you, right? That's what the South African foreign minister said. And then, that takes us to the sort of European end of the spectrum, so to speak. And it's perhaps unsurprising that Ireland is at the good end of that European spectrum, right? Irish people, the sort of colonized white people, right? So Irish people have this experience of being colonized, and the Irish government, I'm not here to uncritically endorse it. It's, I noticed that Palestine Action era has just emerged on the scene, right? It's clear that the Irish government is complicit in this genocide. I'm not here to give them some carte blanche, right? They are on the Zionist end of the spectrum as far as I'm concerned, but they have at least done something, right? They've joined the genocide case. There's a debate in the Dáil at the moment about banning goods. And then we come to the sort of terrible, extremely and openly racist end of the spectrum, where we find countries, nation states like Germany and the United States, and indeed Britain, okay? I obviously practice in England and Wales. That's what I'm most familiar with. The situation in England, obviously the British government is a staunch supporter of its little loyal Jewish Ulster, has been for literally hundreds of years. But Germany is predictably absolutely terrible on this issue. It's an extremely narcissistic place, right? Full of German people trying to process their guilt at the fact that they engaged in a mass murder of Jews and communists and disabled people in the Holocaust, and sort of bizarrely using that as justification for their endorsement of yet another genocide. So the received wisdom seems to be, not as a matter of law, but as a matter of politics, that it's perhaps unsurprising, but no less disgusting, that the Germans think they have anything to tell anyone about how to resist a genocide, right? And I should say, I think it's important not to homogenize Germans, right? There are many Germans during the Holocaust who gave their lives to fight the Nazis, right? Anyone is free to choose the correct position. Any German person, any British person, Yemeni person, whoever you might be, you can choose to reject Zionism. You can choose to set your face against this fascist ideology and do whatever you can to stand up against it. And that brings me to the legal matter that you're talking about. it's yet another morbid symptom, right? These so-called liberal democracies find themselves having to chew through their own human rights laws, their own liberal safeguards, their legal safeguards. And so we find ourselves in the absurd position where people who haven't even committed a crime, they don't even stand accused of transgressing any of Germany's unreconstructed criminal laws. It's just that they had the courage to take some kind of action. I think it was at a university, to do something to stand up and be counted and to oppose Zionism at a moment when it is enacting a genocide. And for that reason, the Germans are trying the German state, I should say, is trying to deport these people. I've been in touch with various lawyers in Germany, and they have a problem that's not that dissimilar to what we have in Britain, but there it's even more pronounced, which is that there is a lack of anti-Zionist lawyers. There's a lack of lawyers who are willing to go into court and state what are, by this point, incredibly obvious facts about Israel, so-called, and its racist governing ideology, right? It's not difficult to do it. I've been doing it myself in various English courts and tribunals. But what's necessary is for people to exercise a bit of samud, as the Palestinians would say, just be steadfast, principled, humble, but robust. Go into court and say the obvious quiet part loud. So
yeah, and just to butt in a little bit there, Frank, I've actually watched you do that in a court hearing myself, albeit in a Zoom, and I have to say, one of the cross examinations I saw you do was one of the most astonishing things I've ever seen. Like you, I don't know if I can get into the case specifically, but you was very strongly challenging a so-called expert witness for the pro-Zionist side, and you were doing it openly. You were very openly expressing your own politics and your own analysis, and at the same time challenging them on the facts. And I think that's an example of exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I remember the case you're talking about. We're still waiting for a judgment in that case, but that's sort of my practice now. Like that was July last year, the trial in that case. I won't comment on it because we're still waiting for a judgment. But broadly, cross-examining people, advancing arguments about Zionism, I would push back slightly, just a matter of my professional reputation. I don't think I was advancing my politics, right? That's my point. My clients were anti-Zionists, and they asked me to advance their case in a particular way, and that's what I, as a lawyer, am asked to do. It's not for me to put my politics at the front and the center. It's my job to actually advance the case and the arguments of my clients. And what all too often happens is liberals who
will impose their liberal politics on the activists.
Yeah. And all I've been doing in these cases where I have to cross-examine Zionist witnesses, Zionist experts, all I do is I state, that's the joy of cross-examination, is you get to sort of say a statement and put it to someone in the form of a question. You just say, well, you're a Zionist, is that right? All right, well, Zionism is the official ideology of the state of Israel. That must be right. And Israel's governed by an apartheid regime. That's obviously right. An apartheid regime is racial domination. But so it follows that if you're a Zionist, you must be in favor of the ideology which, as a matter of fact, is currently enacting racial domination against Palestinians. And you're also, these Zionist witnesses are interested in maintaining a demographic majority for Jews, and they view non-Jews as a demographic threat. So you just say all of this stuff to them.
But they're so not used to hearing that. They're used to deference.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think, I'm not trying to put my identity at the center of the picture here, but I think the fact that I come from South Armagh, the fact that I come from Britain's oldest colony, like we don't take lectures from the British Empire about how to resist colonialism where I come from. We fight the British Empire. We have hundreds of years of history of fighting the British Empire. And I think that's part of what's happening is these British judges are extremely complacent. They're used to thinking of Irish Republican liberation movement, of other liberation movements as being these kind of cartoonish, two-dimensional evil characters who just hate Britain and her civilized laws or whatever. And they've just turned us into these parodies of ourselves. And when they actually meet us in flesh and blood, we're like, hey man, like, I'm just some guy. I don't have all the answers, but it seems like you're very, very racist, and you always have been. Do you have any basis for disagreeing with that? And they've never been told that. Like, hey, your judges and your witnesses and your people in the belly of one of the most violently racist empires in human history. And it isn't just that. I'm really clear that it's not just that Israel is in crisis and Zionism is in crisis. It's that the global political order that allows for this kind of mass murder of people because of their race in order to propagate a little loyal Jewish Ulster to advance now mostly American and NATO interests in the region, we have to tear down the entire system that allowed this, that allowed Zionism to do this to Palestinians. And so, in my opinion, the crisis of Zionism is a crisis of global imperial capitalist hegemony, certainly US hegemony. It seems as though the US empire is in crisis, and you see that across various theaters, of which Palestine is only one. And so we must, I mean, I don't need to tell you on this stream, like, we mustn't be complacent. Zionism is in crisis, but we must ensure that we make this the terminal crisis of Zionism by continuing to diligently confront Zionism wherever we can. And in my case, that means going into court and saying with all humility, but without flinching and without compromising on what my clients want me to say, that Zionism is a racist ideology. It's the ideology of an apartheid regime that's committing a genocide. It views Palestinians as a racial threat to the demographic purity of its desired ethno-state. And any human with a conscience, and certainly any judge imposing any law that claims to take human rights and anti-racism seriously, needs to acknowledge that in their actions and their judgments. It's not that difficult. And I hope that we can increase the capacity. There are some formidable lawyers in Germany doing really vital work about this issue. I know Alexander 𝐄𝐥𝐜𝐿 personally. He's a friend of mine, a formidable lawyer. He's got staunch anti-Zionist politics, and he just goes into court and like some of us in Britain and a growing number of lawyers are just, it's not that difficult to go in and say the quiet part loud. So hopefully that's what will happen in this case. Yeah. Just if and when it comes to court, that they'll be represented by good lawyers who just say, hold on a second, what? You're deporting Irish people to Ireland because they correctly suggested that the German state is engaged in yet another genocide.
Yeah, well, if we could move on a little bit to Britain, as you mentioned, the British government itself, the British state, has acted incredibly fanatically in the protection of Israel. And we've seen the repression of direct action groups like Palestine Action, with many even being tarred with trumped up terrorism allegations or insinuations or associations, put in solitary confinement. Activists and journalists have been raided and repressed, including myself, of course, in October of last year when my home was raided by counter-terror police and all my journalistic devices seized. And most recently, of course, we've seen the Irish rap band 𝐓𝐡𝐞, one of their members, being charged with a terror-related offence. And there's a whole host of these things happening. Why do you think the British, I mean, you've touched on it, but why do you think the British state, even under the Labour government, or especially under the Labour government, has played a role during this genocide, second only to Germany in its fanatical devotion to Israel?
Well, some historical context is important here, right? For hundreds of years, literally, I mean, Andreas Malm's pamphlet, The Destruction of Palestine is the Destruction of the Earth, is really good on this stuff, right? He talks about how the British Navy mechanized its navy and added steam power in 1840, and then bombed Acre, right, in Palestine on the Mediterranean coast, and then sort of chased the Ottoman army down the Mediterranean Sea and the Mediterranean coast of. And so that's 1840. And then he talks about how at that stage, British statespeople and British polite society was talking about this fantasy of a Jewish colony. And then the more well-known date, of course, is 1917, which is the Balfour Declaration. And then, of course, there's the Mandate. So Britain is literally the occupier and the colonial occupier of Palestine. And I just think, as someone familiar with the Irish struggle, right, it's through the Irish struggle that I came to the Palestinian struggle. I know that most people, and I'm not trying to generalize too much, but a lot of people certainly in the British establishment have extremely short memories, and they're very complacent about thinking about the extent to which this is Britain's doing. Britain is responsible for this crisis in Palestine, right? It's responsible for the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. It's responsible for giving space to the idea that there should be this ethno-state in Palestine, right? So that's the historical context. And then contemporary British policy continues to be staunchly Zionist. I personally feel relatively hopeful about this. My perspective is limited. I'm just one person. What do I know, right? But from where I'm standing, I really think Zionism is collapsing. I think that if we're diligent, if we're humble, but like if we really make the efforts to get organized and keep pushing back against this fascist ideology, that it is in the stage of collapsing. I think that you have opposition Israeli ministers saying, hold on, I think we might be a pariah state now. And you know, all the other things that I've listed, I could go on, right? There's all of these morbid symptoms. Seems like Zionism is collapsing. And the key strategic decision then for people in a country like Britain is, do we acknowledge the extent to which the Zionist entity was only allowed to exist for this long because of countries like Britain and the US, and therefore suggests that, look, the crisis of Zionism is a crisis of British imperial hegemony, it's a crisis of US imperial hegemony? Or do we sort of try to allow the imperialists in countries like Britain to cut off the gangrene infected leg, right? The Zionism infected leg, if you will. Do we allow them to cut off the limb to save the imperialist beast, the body of the imperialist beast? I'm sorry if that's a crass metaphor, given how many people in Palestine are actually having to lose their limbs. But you follow what I'm saying, right? I think that some people focus on the Zionist entity and they lose sight of the extent to which the British Empire is directly implicated in this genocide, right? Various journalists, right? Matt Kennard has talked a lot about the surveillance flights that the British state is running from its Cyprus military base. There's an ongoing judicial review, of course, in this country, challenging the British state's continued arms sales. And it's unraveling. You can see that the way the heat is coming. David Lammy seems to be personally implicated in this, right? The allegations against him are mounting. Keir Starmer is certainly personally implicated, right? Obviously, the allegation against him is that he committed a war crime on camera. So the chickens are coming home to roost, so to speak. So we know the British state is a staunch ally of the Zionist entity. And that is why when Zionism enters into crisis, the British state has to increase its repression of anyone who tries to land a blow on Zionism, because Zionism is so weak right now, it's collapsing. Like the territory on which the Zionists are standing, literally and metaphorically, is collapsing. And so the British state is like, hold on, trying to play this rearguard action. And they're not used to being on the back foot like this. And that registers practically, sort of in the way that you said when you were talking about the cross-examination of that Zionist witness in that case, right? I feel as though a lot of people who, maybe they say they're on the left, maybe they say they're pro-Palestinian, they haven't got the memo. It's open season on the ideology of Zionism. It's not capable of defending itself, right? And so all we should do is go into whatever forum we have access to, whether that's just talking to your relatives or talking to your trade union, talking to your colleagues at work, or if you're a lawyer, going into court and making arguments, talking to your clients about it, and then seeing how they want to run their case, and then go into court and just say, hey, this is a terminal crisis. There's morbid symptoms everywhere. And that brings me to the specific point you raised about journalists. The work that you're doing is absolutely vital. I'm a massive admirer of your platform, always have been. Like it's almost 15 years. Well, I'm getting old now. It's going on 2 decades that I've been involved in the Palestine solidarity struggle. And Electronic Intifada has always been there as this formidable resource. The blows that you are landing, the blows that other anti-Zionists are landing against the fascist ideology of Zionism and its apartheid state are doing so much damage that they have to increase these repressive mechanisms, because the words that come out of your mouth, merely reporting on the facts of what is happening on the ground, are doing so much damage that is why they have to try and repress you. I'm sorry for the way that you were personally treated. It's an outrage, but it's in some ways quite a hopeful sign that journalists doing their job in the formidable way that you and many others, many Palestinian journalists, of course, have done their job. There's a reason why the Zionists attack journalists in Gaza. It's because it's a live stream genocide, and the way that Palestinians have turned the figure of the journalist, as among many other figures, into this hero, it's so moving. Like to have to be asked to document your own genocide, and yet that is exactly what they have done. How the Palestinians teach us dignity, how they teach us what it means to be a journalist, what it means to be a lawyer, right? One of the cases we're going to come to involves this guy, Raji Sourani. I'll come to that. Raji Sourani is a formidable lawyer, right? He's one of the guys who, before I became a lawyer, made me want to be a lawyer. I remember he came to speak in London 15 years ago, and he talked about all of the cases that he was losing, right? He said, we brought close to 2,000 cases and we've won 19. That's like less than 1% success rate. And someone said, why do you do it? Why do you bring cases when you know you're going to lose? And he said, I don't want the Zionists to be able to pretend that they didn't know what they were doing to us. When the reckoning comes, I want their own courts to have had all of the records necessary to see that what they were doing to us was a racist colonial project. I'm paraphrasing, you understand. But the Palestinians teach us what it means to be human. They teach us the meaning of dignity. And I'm not putting them on a pedestal and fetishizing them. When we say in our thousands and our millions, we are all Palestinians, we can and should negate that. Palestinians are all us. We are all human. And the racist Zionist lie that there are no people in Palestine, that it was a land without a people, is wrong. And Palestinians, by existing and showing us what it means to exist in the face of that, certainly they've taught me what it means to be a human, the sheer depth of dignity and courage and samud that humans are capable of. We are all completely changed by this. We will never be the same again.
Beautiful, Frank. Thank you. I mean, finally, if you want to talk about some of the cases that you're involved in, and the significance of these kinds of, you know, I mean, you mentioned the documentation of Palestinian journalists recording their own genocide, the work of human rights, workers like Raji Sourani, who know that it's a Sisyphean task to bring these kinds of cases before courts at this moment, but doing it because that's the thing you have to do. What kind of cases are you working on, and how are they helping to expose Zionism, to expose the West's complicity in this depraved genocidal project, and what keeps you going as a lawyer? You know, I mean, it is also a Sisyphean task for lawyers who are on the right side of history.
I mean, I'll take those in reverse order. What keeps me going is, I would say, love. I know that's a cliche, but Che Guevara said something about that, right? You have to be motivated by love, right? And I think you even have to love your enemies, and like that's why I think that we should overthrow imperial capitalism and create a system that's actually premised upon meeting human needs instead of exploiting the vast majority of humanity to create profits for the small number of people who own the means of production. That's the honest answer. I wake up every day and I try and think, hey, how can I meet human needs? How can I stand in awe of my fellow human and try to build a society that's more loving than this hateful murder machine that we seem to be trapped inside? There must be something more hopeful in this. And I think when you think like that, when you're like, well, I hope that we can build something better, because the alternative doesn't bear thinking about, right? Rosa Luxemburg said it in 1915. Think about that. It's 1 year into the First World War, right? The mass murder of working class people with machine guns, the worst barbarity that humanity had seen up until that point. And she said it's socialism or barbarism, and it remains as true today, if not more so, right? So that's what keeps me going. Is like, what's the alternative? You're gonna let the fascists win? You're gonna let Zionism successfully eradicate Palestinians because they're the wrong race? Like, no, I don't want to live in a world where that's allowed to happen. So I'll live and die fighting it. And I'm really fond, recently I've been fond of this expression about dying on the hill, right? Because I've been dragged into regulatory proceedings where I've been forced to try and defend tweets, successfully defended all these tweets that I've done, right? Like criticizing Zionism, saying, look, it's a racist ideology, and if you're a Zionist, you are racist. And obviously a lot of Zionists don't like that. And then this metaphor of defending the hill comes up, right? And it's like, well, the hill's, in the case of those tweets, the hill's not mine to abandon, right? The hill is Palestine. It's like, if you didn't want to talk about the hill, then you shouldn't have. But now that you have to die on the hill. But the point is, like, I'm not actually being asked to die on the hill. I'm lucky enough to live in an extremely peaceful imperial metropole where my life is not in danger the way that Palestinians are. And so I'm fond of saying, I've taken to saying recently, like, the point is not to die on the hill. Like this idea that Palestinians are somehow morbid and they just love death. Like, no, they just love Palestine. They live in Gaza. It's their home and they just love it. They don't want to die on the hill. Like, obviously we all die and one day they will die in their home, but they just want to live on the hill. Like, so I would encourage people not to die on the hill, just live on the hill, but love it so much that you would rather die than leave it. And then again, to negate the in our thousands and our millions, it's like the hill is the planet Earth, man. We all die here. Like, we're all going to die on the hill, but like, why don't we just try and live on the hill together in this much more hopeful way? So that's how I stay hopeful. It's like, we're going to win. The Palestinians are going to win, and humanity is going to win. We're going to overthrow Israel. It's going to collapse, and we're going to replace it with something beautiful, a one state in which Jews and Palestinians and everyone can live together in peace. I really believe that. And we're going to overthrow imperial capitalism. Like, I don't want to live in a world where it's allowed to continue existing. I just think fundamentally we should be more ambitious than to allow this obnoxious system. Like, and again, it's not just so-called Israel, right? It's the entire system of social relations that allowed all these so-called nation states to sit by and participate actively in the mass murder of Palestinians because they're not Jewish. That's disgusting. I don't want to live in a world like that. And then as to the cases I've been working on, maybe I'll just whistle through them. I've got a little list of the ones I spoke to various clients and said, would you like me to mention these cases? Okay, so I'll be brief. I'll do a little whistle stop tour, but this is part of what's making me feel hopeful. Going to court on these cases, and our enemies, our opponents, they have no answer to these questions, right? I'm doing a lot of Gaza upgrade appeals, so representing asylum seekers from Gaza. And it seems as though the British Secretary of State is currently granting humanitarian protection, which is a lower form of leave, to respond to indiscriminate violence, but she's not granting the higher form of asylum, which is based on persecution, right? So indiscriminate versus discriminate, you understand. And the arguments we're running there are extremely interesting, in my opinion, right? What we're basically saying is if the level of violence is indiscriminate, so you've accepted that by granting humanitarian protection, when it's a genocide, it becomes discriminate, right? If the reason you are refusing to discriminate is because you're hostile to the very existence of Palestinians, then everyone in Palestine is entitled to asylum if they want it. So that's one of the arguments we're running. Then I've got this case against Arsenal, which has hit the press recently. So a formidable working class client of mine, Mark Bonnick, is honestly such an honor to represent him, right? A lot of working class people have been sticking their head above the parapet and saying, he said some tweets about, for example, this is all about Jewish supremacy. And he got shoved out of his club, Arsenal, where he'd worked for more than 2 decades. And there's now a massive campaign. And I'd encourage any Gooners watching this, get involved with, Gooners for a Free Palestine, get involved with the campaign, sign the petition, find the crowdfunder if you can and support that. Just find ways to pressure the club to give that man his job back. He did the right thing by criticizing an apartheid regime in a genocide. Then there's a lot of regulatory cases. I won't touch on them individually, but I'm involved in representing solicitors, appealing their the decision to be struck off in the High Court, representing barristers, representing nurses, doctors, teachers, basically a growing number of different types of professional who keep getting dragged in front of these regulatory bodies. And like you said, Asa, in some of those cases, the regulators rely on these so-called Zionist experts, and it's just like shooting fish in a barrel. You just say to them, the regulator, why are you relying on a racist person to bring a prosecution against an allegation of racism? It's just completely ridiculous. A formidable client called Abubaker, her husband was trapped in Gaza during the genocide, and because she was talking about it and reacting to it in the way that you would expect, she was beside herself. Her employer disgracefully saw fit to fire her. It's one of the most egregious instances of unfair dismissal I've ever seen in my decade odd of practice at the bar. I'm also representing Palestinian citizens of Israel who claim asylum. So think about that, right? Israeli passport holders, but who are Palestinian. They are increasingly coming to Britain and claiming asylum. And I'll be brief. I'll wrap up. There's too much to talk about, really. All of my cases are to do with Palestine, but just giving you a whistle-stop tour. There's an amazing case involving Dr. Tawfiq Haddad. Again, I encourage you to Google. There's a Verso blog talking about his case. He's a Palestinian American academic who was working out of East Jerusalem in a colonial era British academic institute called CBRL. And they are trying to say that the Israeli courts, the courts of an apartheid state, should have jurisdiction over that Palestinian man's claim. And we're saying, no, you're based in Britain. There's no basis for the employment tribunal in Britain to endorse the illegal annexation of East Jerusalem. So that's a fascinating case. And then I'm again involved in the prosecution, the attempted prosecution of 10 British people who went to serve in the Zionist military. So I've seen all of the incredible detail. I'm a team of 5 barristers, some of the most formidable barristers I've worked with. And I've been involved in that project from the start. I don't want to overstate my role in it, but I've seen all of the evidence against those 10 people. And it's my hope that if they come back to this country, they will be arrested and charged. I could go on. There's a case against Lloyds Bank on which we're awaiting judgment. I'm representing 2 people at SOAS University who were sabbatical officers that were fired and prevented from taking up their democratically elected positions, in part because of their criticisms of the Zionist entity. And I'm also acting for a growing number of people in the NHS who are bringing actions in the employment tribunal against their employers because they've attempted to organize. So one of my cases involves 2 people whose names have been anonymized, but it's in the press if you Google it. People there's a Guardian case about it, right? People who try to organize a peaceful protest against the Zionist genocide and were met with repression. I would encourage anyone listening to this. Zionism is so weak right now. Speak up. Now is the time to speak up and take risks in support of Palestine. And if you do, there is a growing number of lawyers who will be able to represent you and go into court and say exactly what you've been saying. Zionism is collapsing. You owe it to your conscience to stand up now. It's become a cliche to say, what did you know what you would have done during a genocide because you're doing it now. Just stand up, use what power you can to stand in solidarity with Palestinians against the fascist ideology of Zionism.
100%. Well, Franck Magennis, thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and hopefully we can have you back on again in the near future to maybe talk about some of the results of these cases. There's so much to talk about. There's so much to get updated on. So we really appreciate your, taking time out from your busy schedule to discuss some of these issues with us today. Thank you.
Frank, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for your work. I feel like getting in trouble just to have you represent me.
No, don't do that.
It would be an honor.
It's been an honor to have you. And yes, like Asa said, please come back and update us on some of these cases. And the fight against Zionism and imperialism continues. Thank you for being
Thank you so much.
of that.
𝐿𝐶𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿𝐈𝐧𝐿 𝐈𝐧𝐭𝐫𝐶𝐞.
Thank you. Oh, that was fantastic.
Yeah,
And
put a smile on my face there.
Yeah, totally. It's needed.
Yeah, much needed.
Totally. Well, we are moving right along. We have two very special guests coming up. Let's just remind people that you are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman here with my colleague Asa Winstanley. Last Saturday, huge numbers of people rallied in towns and cities across Ireland for the National March for Palestine. May 17th was chosen by the Ireland-Palestine Solidarity Campaign because it coincided with Israel's National Day of Remembrance for the Great Famine. Sorry, Ireland's National Day of Remembrance for the Great Famine. Here's a clip of the march on Dublin's O'Connell Street, filmed by the Electronic Intifada's own Ali Abunimah.
3, 4, occupation no more. 5, 6, 7, 8, Israel is a terrorist state. Free Palestine. Free Palestine. Free Palestine. Free Palestine.
Ali joins us now from Dublin, along with a very special guest, Abubaker Abed, who arrived in Ireland just over a month ago after being evacuated from Gaza. Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
So good to see you guys together. It's a dream.
He's real.
Yeah, it's amazing. I hear he's also tall.
He is quite tall, but he's Abubaker. And I just keep looking at, for the past 5-6 days I've been here, and sadly this is my last night here in Ireland. I just keep looking at him and saying I can't believe it's you and that you're really there in front of me, because the odds are against anyone surviving this genocide, and it's just a dream come true. And what we've been saying to each other, and also talking with friends in Gaza and with Abubaker's family, saying that if this dream came true, others can as well, and we hope everyone will be saved from this genocide.
Abubaker, what's it? We'll get into your journey in a little bit, but
people don't know him. I was going to introduce him to you, but unfortunately, so
beautiful.
For people who don't know, the guest next to me, he's Dr. Ali Abunimah. He's a writer and a journalist. If you don't know him, we will send some links to his recent works, but until now, he's next to me. So yeah, you probably would know him more in the next days.
Amazing. Ali, it's going to be so good to get to know you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's also nice being in Ireland with like someone who gets recognized in the streets.
No, he got more recognized than me.
Well, we're definitely among friends here. I can tell you that.
You're in a civilized country, unlike
the only one in Europe, the only civilized country in Europe.
Yeah.
Well, tell us, you, Abubaker, you were one of the speakers from the stage of the rally a few days ago, and we're going to look at that clip in a moment. But describe what it was like to be at the march, amongst so many people calling for the protection and the safety of you and your family and the 2 million people in Gaza, calling for an end to this slaughter and an end to Zionism as the state ideology that's helping carry it out.
Well, I have to be honest, because I never thought in my life that I would be seeing such a rally. It was absolutely overwhelming, and I felt like home, to be honest, because for the past 30 days before the rally, and I'm still, to be honest, but maybe a lower degree right now, I really didn't expect that people, like so many people attended this rally and were in the rally, thousands, tens of thousands of people. So for me, there is I can imagine that there is a high sense of understanding and awareness of the Palestinian cause. People know that, people are aware of that. But what really, really intrigued me was the fact that they knew and they pushed their governments, you know, they're trying to tackle their governments and telling them and asking them to do more. So this kind of support amidst all what is happening and after, you know, following the very, very impossible decision that I had to make, it really felt surreal. And I really, like, you know, even after the rally, a lot of people came in and supported me and uplifted my spirits. All of what happened was absolutely unreal and really, really got overwhelmed and very, very happy to be with them, and felt like home, and this is like my second family. So it's a truth when people really once mentioned, or they're still mentioning that Ireland is Palestine of Europe, and you can't see, like here, there is no way that you can see probably a sign of anti-Palestine or something. The vast majority of the population, even members of the government, and as I was invited over to the Irish Parliament, the vast majority are pro-Palestinian, and they know the cause, and they're trying to pressure the governments to do more. So all that means to me a lot. And for Palestine, and to Palestinians also trapped in the Turkey, even my family, when they saw that, they really got so emotional, and so did everyone in Gaza. So it was one of the most beautiful moments to be in a protest, because I've been seeing them, I've been watching them since the start of the genocide, but I really wanted to know, and was desperate to be among them one day, and I was last Saturday, and it was absolutely just so delightful, amazing to be with the Irish people. They're so amazing.
And Abby, yeah, tell us about.
Yeah, I mean, I arrived early Saturday morning and then met Abubaker, and we went to the rally, and I mean, it was just, the emotion was overwhelming. To be there by itself was incredible, and then to be there with Abubaker was just unbelievable. And to be marching, and people were there from all over Ireland. We met people from every part of this country, from Cork, Limerick, Belfast, every part of the country, and every age. Just seeing the diversity of people there, it was just astonishing. I needed it. My soul needed it. I wish everyone could feel the love and support and solidarity that we experienced in Dublin on Saturday. But it's also important to point out this wasn't just in Dublin. It was that the national march was all over the country. There were rallies everywhere in Ireland, and they're still going on. If you look at the Ireland Palestine Solidarity Campaign website, you'll see lists in recent days and in coming days of rallies, protests in dozens of towns all over this country. And even when we were driving past the American embassy, I think Abubaker posted this, or you posted this
there was a sign
on Twitter. We saw someone holding a sign outside the American embassy: "Stop starving Gaza." Everywhere you go, you see Palestinian flags in people's windows, and you're not scared to tell people you're Palestinian, and that's a feeling I'm not used to.
And we also went to one of the shops and spoiled all the boycott products. Never worry, I'm gonna wave if they catch me.
Well, I want to also bring on Jon, because I know that he wants to say hi to you, Abubaker. And
hi, Jon.
Yeah, like let me in.
Hi, Jon.
Hi, Ali. Beautiful moment.
Yeah,
unbelievable, isn't it?
It really is. It is. I mean, one thing that and you wrote about this for Dropsite News right after you arrived in Ireland, but it was the first time you had ever left Gaza a month ago. The first time you had ever seen your country, historic Palestine, although you weren't even able to get out and explore, obviously. The first time you had ever been on a plane. And what hit me was the way that you described seeing Palestine for the first time outside of Gaza. Can you talk a little bit about that journey, what it was like, what kind of struck you the most?
I never believed that I would make it. I have to be honest. I was completely alarmed and frightened and intimidated because I know that the Israelis have been for a long time, and still now, they've been chasing me, and they've already put a kill target on my back for a very long time. And that was the concern of every single one who knew me, and of my family, of my mom. So to be honest, all on the way through to outside Gaza, I was just thinking about one thing, that there's no way that I'm leaving this destroyed. I'm leaving this homeland destroyed and flattened and leveled to the ground. There's no way, but I had to. So I was crying from my inside. I've got to be honest. And then when I made the journey outside, I was thinking about my mom and about my family, because I know that my mom, when she told me, Abubaker, I don't need you anymore in the house because you're a harm to me and my family. That was the most devastating thing I've ever heard in my life. I didn't think, well, here's something as more devastating as it is.
Because she wanted to convince you to leave.
Well, I know, but emotionally, think about it. I'm just 22 years old. My mom really loved me the most, and she always thinks about me. But the way it is said, it's very unbearable. Then when I went outside and we reached, the corridors and the checkpoints, it was very frightening. And I wrote that there was an Israeli soldier who was watching over me, and I felt very, very frightened and intimidated. But after all of what happened, and after I was separated by the Israeli officers from my group, and I was like, my ID was double checked and my face and everything, I made it to the Irish Embassy bus. But then when you look at it, the hardest part of it all is to look at Palestine, is to see the wonderful, the stunning, the gorgeous stretches of land, the historic archaeological places, the big, huge mountains, the trees, the palm trees, the dates, the red and the yellow dates, and the green fields, everything, the Dead Sea, the buildings stood in the beach of the Dead Sea, and how people are relaxing and chilling on the beach. But seeing that, and you can't really do anything, you're just taking occupied Palestine as just a layover. It's unbearable. It's just like you can't really set foot outside the pass on your homeland. That is your homeland. And then the language is Hebrew, and Israeli flags are everywhere across those areas near the southern areas of Palestine, like Beersheba and other parts like Jaffa, near Jericho, and near the Dead Sea. That was lethal, literally lethal. I couldn't really bear it. And I was like, my blood was boiling every single moment when I was seeing something like that. So occupied Palestine, and I knew from that moment, because I never imagined they would be seeing occupied Palestine the first thing outside Gaza. I knew from that moment that fighting for a free Palestine is worth it, and fighting for a free Palestine will take many years. Here in Ireland, it took them more than 700 years to tackle and the British occupation. I know it's been 77 years, which is very long as well, but I believe that for me personally, that I knew from that moment that fighting for Palestine is worth it all, and Palestine needs me. Palestine needs us to continue speaking up, to continue doing our work. And this is a form of resistance. Everyone in Gaza has their own form of resistance. The people, the journalists, the doctors, the nurses, the teachers, everyone, every single category of those people. So for me personally, there is no way just to stay here. I'll be doing it from here. I'll be doing everything in my power, and will continue speaking up. But I will never abandon Palestine, because it lives in my heart, and my heart is still there. So I'm physically safe here. I'm more emotionally devastated, and I can't really tell you how shattered my emotions are, because I miss home, I miss my homeland, I miss doing everything in my power. However, I will I will just do everything. I will die. Like, our blood is going to water Palestine and free Palestine very soon for the next generations. But hopefully we will liberate it together.
I want to play some clips of your speech that you gave at the rally over the weekend. Do we have? I think we do have a couple clips. Yeah, there were so many powerful speakers at the rally in Dublin, including Mahmoud Nawaja, the general coordinator of Palestine's Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions National Committee. Iman Al-Hajj Ali is another Palestinian from Gaza who arrived in Ireland at the same time as you, Abubaker. And we're proud to say that just like you, she has been a regular contributor to the Electronic Intifada. Before we go to your clip, let's listen to a brief clip of Iman's speech.
I never thought that this would be my story in my 20s, but here I am, like many other Palestinians, asking questions that have no clear answers. Like, will we live to see the day when Gaza is free? Will we be even more than survivors? We are demanding for our rights. We are not asking for miracles. And despite everything, hope is still there. We are still hopeful. We see hope in our children, in We see hope in our children, in our mothers who tell them stories under the appalling sounds of drones and bombs. We see hope in our doctors who are treating their patients, in our teachers who teach their students, and in our journalists who are covering the truth despite the threats they have been facing on the ground. Hope is what keeps Gaza's people going, and they refuse to be broken. We are scattered, yes, across the world, but one thing connects us. The main thing that connects us to our country is our belonging to this land. We belong to our homeland, to our ancestors, and we carry Gaza wherever we go. I left Gaza, but Gaza will never leave me.
Iman Al-Hajj Ali. And there are so many students from Gaza who are now in Ireland. Ali, did you want to say something about those students and what it's like meeting some of these EI contributors for the first time?
It's been, very emotional. I got to spend time with some of them, and on the one hand, you feel overjoyed at seeing them and seeing them safe. Hearing them in person tell their stories of what they've left behind, and just like Abubaker, the constant, overwhelming concern for their families while also adjusting to a new country. But it also made me feel optimistic in a way, because there is, the word resilience gets overused, but these are very strong, determined, optimistic people despite everything. And I was so proud. It sent chills up my spine to listen to Iman, having read her work at the Electronic Intifada and other publications over the last 2 years, and to see her and hear her was just unbelievable. And we feel so much pride for all these students. I'm certain they'll be successful here, and they couldn't have a better home than Ireland now. I mean, everyone hopes to go home to Palestine. For the time being, they're here. There's so much love around them, and I just want to say thank you to the people of Ireland too, because it's been an extraordinary welcome for them.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, let's take a look at the clip of your speech, Abubaker.
Did I speak in that rally?
Apparently you did, or it was someone who looked exactly like you.
I'm not sure.
Well, let's look and see.
Well, I'm overwhelmed. I never imagined that I would see this in my life. To every child, for every child here, for everyone, from the young to the old, for the newborn babies that I've seen, I want to bow for you. As you all know, I've left Gaza recently after spending 560 days, leaving everything behind, including my family, my home, and my memories. When I came here, I came with deep wounds in my heart. I couldn't imagine that I would feel normal. But since I saw you, and you know that I've come here to this protest, to this huge march with no family, and I don't know if my family will be okay. But you have come with your families. I wish I would be in your positions, but I'm so happy for your presence here. You are, for me, after seeing this, after being so speechless, my second family, Ireland, feels like home.
It's beautiful. I think that really was you, Abubaker.
Yeah. It's real. I keep checking.
Jon, did you, and Asa, did you have any questions you wanted to ask?
Well, I was in attack, Jon, so to let you know.
Yeah. Come on, Jon.
Well, I just wanted to say that we've been honored to have you on our show this whole time, and the work that you've done has been so important, and we're so proud of it. And I'm just really glad that you're safe, and I can imagine all of the emotions that you're going through are really conflicted right now. And yeah, you're just, you've been in my thoughts consistently.
Well, being here with you, with Dr. Ali, him coming from Chicago, really means the world. Being with you all the time, you really know that without you, it could have been impossible to survive and to have survived. You always hold me in a very, very special place in your hearts, and that really, really means the world to me. I will never forget it at all, every single one of you, and you really know. And I don't think about other media outlets. You already know that Abubakar is EI's, Abubakar is yours, and you really know that. So it's just, I mean, for me, wherever Abubakar is, the shine and the light that you're seeing Abubakar in, it's a reflection of your smiles, of your hope, and of your support over the course of the past 560 days. And already, when I went to the parliament, I talked about you, talked about the work we did, and that's going to be the same experience because I'm your student now and forever.
Yeah, it's been, I mean, it's been such an honor really for us, for you to, you know, be a kind of accidental correspondent for us. You know, I mean, we wish for another world where you could just go back to being the football journalist that you want to be. You know, where we wish for that.
Play football.
Yeah.
There's unreleased secret tapes of me.
Post that very soon.
Hopefully they don't fall into the wrong hands.
He said I run like a tortoise.
Yeah, I already said that because I couldn't even shoot the ball well.
I admit it. Guilty as charged.
It's incredible.
You find it well for him very soon.
I mean, you know, obviously, Abubaker, your presence in Ireland is already having quite a big impact. You're being recognized in the street. You're being asked to speak at these enormous marches.
Rights for me.
It's perfect. There's a lawmaker from the Social Democratic Party, Rory Hearn, who spoke to the Dáil, calling for the Irish government to do much more than it's doing to try and stop the genocide. Let's play that and then talk about have your reaction right after.
To a journalist at length. Abubaker is his name. He's a young journalist. He's 22. I spoke with him for a podcast and he described to me, and I would really encourage people to listen to it. He described that he sat down with his family about 2 or 3 months ago. They'd no food left and they had to eat pet food. He described that was the moment at which him and his family were completely dehumanized, humiliated. He has come to Ireland and he took part in the Irish-Palestine Solidarity Campaign marches this weekend. And he said there he felt human again. He has been broken like so many people in Gaza. We have a responsibility to act, and I want to commend all the protests been organised by people across this country and indeed across this world. We have to continue. We are not powerless. We have to stop this.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of amazing footage to me, really. I mean, you know, our guest earlier, Franck Magennis, was talking about, you know, the limitations of the Irish government and all of that, and I agree with all of that, but nonetheless, like you can't imagine seeing something like that happening in the British Parliament. Like, as much as I would like to see you in real life, Abubaker, you know, Ireland is a far better place for you right now. I mean, what's that like? You know, seeing a national lawmaker talk about you like that.
Well, it's significant to make a change and to talk to those in power in the country. Those parliamentarians have the ability to talk to their prime minister and to the government itself, and they can really convince them to do something. So for me, it was really important to sit with him and talk about him and tell him that your government must do more, and your government must stop its trades or its relations with Israel, and it must stop, you know, all the fighter jets coming over its airspace to Israel that are used to kill us. And the Occupy Territories bill must be enacted. It must be passed, and that's something I said in the rally. For me, he's a very humble man. I have to be honest. He's a very, very humble man, a very, very nice guy. He's absolutely terrific. He got me so emotional. He got so emotional because he has a son like me. So I just brought it to him from that aspect and told him that you have a son my age, but what I was going through was just unimaginable. So I tried to explain everything for him. I needed him to feel like a father, not like just a parliamentarian, so he could really face his government and talk about it more. And this is my responsibility here. I have to talk to the governments. I have to reach out to the people, in power, to let them know and make them know what is happening in Gaza. You know, I've lived it all. I've lived it from day 1 to day 560. And what is going to happen in the next days is going to be a similar experience to what I have endured. I've seen Gaza, the whole Gaza Strip devastated. I reported from every single area, and you probably remember, like probably a couple of months ago when we were talking about that in January, when I trekked all across Gaza. So these feelings and the images that I held or I carried with me from Gaza are still home to me. And the way to vent this pain is just to sit with people, with those people in governments and in parliaments, and tell them what it is like to see their homeland bombed. Because I have to be honest, every place that I see here, I have that idea that it's going to be bombed. Every airplane that I see in the sky, I feel it's going to fall or it's going to unleash a missile or a rocket on one of the nearby buildings. I'm simply traumatized that I can't plot this pain out. However, I'll try to do my best. I'm a representative. I have a responsibility to do here and to do everywhere I go, which is to talk about my experience, which is to make sure that the Palestinian cause is being talked about everywhere, and to force governments and all those parliamentarians to do something, because they are humans and they are fellow humans. So the common humanity that they must have is what they need to do, and is what they need to tell their governments. Because if governments listen to their people, this genocide would have been ended a very long time ago. But the dehumanization of Palestinians can stop, and Israel can be stopped once those governments listen to their people. So talking to the parliamentarians is a very important experience, and something that I can do to help my people in some way.
And can you talk about the Occupied Territories Bill, the significance of it? Maybe Ali, give us some background on what it is and why it's important for people to support and perhaps replicate in their own countries.
Yeah, the Occupied Territories Bill, and we've reported on this at the Electronic Intifada, passed its first stages with strong majorities in both houses of the Irish Parliament, Oireachtas, in 2018. And what it would do is it would basically outlaw trade in goods and services with Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank, which are, of course, illegal under international law. But despite its initial success in passing its first stages, successive Irish governments have stalled it, claiming that enacting the bill would violate European Union law because trade is something that the EU is responsible for regulating. But that has been challenged, and the government here has basically conceded on much of that, and they're saying that they want to pass the bill through its final stages. But what they've been trying to do now is really to exclude trade in services from the bill and make it apply only to tangible goods, which would really gut it of much of its power. It would mean that they would create a very big loophole, which activists here, many of whom I've spoken to, are strongly opposed to. And I met many people at that amazing march on Saturday who are fierce Palestine solidarity campaigners in Ireland, including Catherine Daly and Dee O'Shea. And if they're watching, I send them love and greetings. It was wonderful meeting you on Saturday. Dee actually set up a petition that I think we can show that has received over 50,000 signatures, and anyone is encouraged to sign it. And the petition says, and I quote, "At this stage in the genocide, it is unbelievable that Ireland has a powerful bill that could help the people of Palestine waiting in the wings to be enacted since 2018. It took immense effort from many political, academic, and legal minds to get the bill to its present position in the legislative process. There is no legal excuse for stalling it any longer." And what I can tell you, even just from being in Ireland for a few days, is that the pressure really is working. The popular pressure is working. And there was a very interesting interview this morning on RTE, the national broadcaster, with the Taoiseach, the Irish Deputy Prime Minister Simon Harris, who is also the Foreign Minister. And it was clear to me from listening to him that he is feeling the pressure from the Irish people. And he said, quote, "I have no policy disagreements with those who want services included in the legislation, none whatsoever." And he claimed he, quote, "absolutely wants to see the bill passed as soon as possible." But he still sounded like he was stalling and trying to evade very firm commitments on a timetable. I think the most significant thing, as Simon Harris said, is that he described what Israel is doing in Gaza as genocidal actions. This means that the Irish, he used that term genocidal actions. And I think even mentioning genocide or genocidal means that the Irish government recognizes that Israel is perpetrating genocide in Gaza. And what that means is that it is no longer optional for Ireland to act. This invokes Ireland's legal responsibilities under the Genocide Convention to act to prevent and halt the genocide. And it's very clear that Ireland has the power to do so, not by itself. But I think the significance of Ireland is that it is a member of the EU. It is a country that has influence on the international stage, has a good reputation on the international stage. And if Ireland took these actions, I am certain, and this is what many people here are telling me, others would follow, that it would just be the first break in the dam, and many other countries would then follow. And Ireland has that opportunity now for global leadership. And what I'm again, what people are telling us here in Ireland is that they see the pressure working. The government is on the defensive. They are rushing to show that they're trying to do something. And what activists here have told me is that that means this is the time to escalate and add more pressure, not to let up in any way. And I suppose that that's true not just in Ireland, but in all countries that have been in one way or another complicit in this genocide.
Yeah. And also this week, the European Union decided to review an agreement on its political and economic ties with Israel, citing Israel's widening assault on Gaza and now its 2-month total blockade of all food, water, and medicine and fuel. The EU is Israel's biggest trading partner with more than $50 billion in trade each year. What do you make of this decision?
Well, just for some background, the EU-Israel Association Agreement, this was signed in 2000, and it's basically a major agreement that gives Israel huge benefits and privileges within the EU. In many respects, almost like a member of the EU, particularly trade, that has really helped enrich Israel in many ways, and a lot of European countries who have companies that have gotten rich off trade with Israel. And so the association agreement is something that is a great benefit to Israel. But here's the thing. Article 2 of that agreement states that relations between the EU and Israel, as well as all the provisions of the agreement itself, shall be based on respect for human rights and democratic principles, which guides their internal and international policy and constitutes an essential element of this agreement. So that's Article 2, not Article 37, not Article 132. Fundamental to the EU-Israel Association Agreement is respect for human rights. And who can say that Israel respects human rights? And yet the demand from people across the European Union since 2000 to end this agreement, or at least suspend it, has gone unanswered by increasingly undemocratic and repressive EU governments. And so in that sense, the announcement that the EU is going to review the agreement is welcome. But my goodness, how little that is and how late.
Yeah.
But I think here, Ireland deserves some credit for the response that Micheál Martin, the Taoiseach, the Irish Prime Minister, gave in Parliament this week in the Dáil, and we can actually take a look at a little clip of that.
Welcome yesterday's decision to review the European Union-Israel Association Agreement to examine Israel's compliance with its human rights obligations. It's a step that is long overdue. Operation of the agreement should now be suspended immediately, pending the outcome, as a sign that there can be no business as usual.
Well, the fact is, and I think many of our Irish friends have stressed this to me, there has been business as usual, including in Ireland. And Micheál Martin was also the foreign minister for a long time. And I'm not sure if he publicly made such a strong statement before. So the fact that he's calling for it to be immediately suspended is a credit to the people of Ireland who have pushed the government to this point, and I think will keep pushing. And it is long overdue, and it's past time for sanctions. So it's a welcome step, but it should never have taken this long. And that review should take 5 seconds. I mean, it should be like, oh, read Article 2. Are human rights being respected? No. Suspend the agreement. Cancel it. Sanctions on Israel. The EU just proudly announced its 17th package of sanctions on Russia since 2022. And we're in 2025, and there is this horror going on before our eyes, this genocide, and they're still in the stage of reviewing. But let us hope they get there. We will welcome it and praise them if they finally do the right thing. But please, for goodness sake, get on with it.
Abubaker, last week we shared an excerpt of the beautiful piece written by your dear friend from Gaza, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿 who you were briefly reunited with when you passed through Amman, Jordan, on your way to Ireland. And I mentioned the piece that you wrote yourself at Dropsite News. And I just wanted to ask you again, you know, how it feels going from the really as the doctor I mentioned in the news report said, the slaughterhouse, the killing fields in Gaza, to being welcome, to being safe, to being able to buy and eat food, to get medical treatment, to walk down the street and not hear drones. I mean, to wake up not to the sound of bombings and explosions, but to birds, to kids playing in the park. You know, like what is this? What kind of just a kind of emotional, where is it? Where is your heart, your emotions these days? And what is that like to be transported to a completely different reality?
It's abhorrent. It's simply, I can't really feel it. You know, my emotions have been frozen since I left, since I first set foot outside Gaza. And I'm trying, Dr. Alvin is well aware of that. I'm trying to find joy, but all the joy that I have is very excruciating. So in my terminology, I would say I'm having a sense of painful joy. I feel very, very, very guilty, very contrite. It's the sense of contrition is absolutely unendurable, you know. And I said something, I will keep saying it wherever I go. And I told Dr. Ali, I told it to Dr. Ali the first time we met, that for 22 years and 5 months, I was dead. When I first arrived here, I was born. So I would say I'm just a 1 month old. This is the exact definition of what it is. And this is the reality that we have to accept. I'm literally a 1 month old. Because what I was living in Palestine, in Gaza, for the past 22 years, particularly since the crippling siege Israel has imposed on the Strip in 2006, was something no one could really imagine. And then a genocide, a Holocaust broke out, where your life was at risk every single moment. I survived many Israeli airstrikes. I survived many times the starvation. I was left with no choice until, just for being a journalist, you're being threatened, just for telling the truth. You know already that most of the times when you're alone, you're here without a family, you're here with no one, just a stranger in a homeland, or probably in a land that doesn't, it's just, it doesn't suit you. You're not here, I'm not here. Like, I wouldn't go back as fast as possible because I have a duty to do, have a duty to really fulfill right now. It's just heartbreaking. And when you see the water, the leftovers in the waste baskets that people are throwing here, what are people doing? Those things are truly priceless for every Palestinian right now. I tasted, as Mr. Uri, and we talked about that. You know, one of the situations that I couldn't really help myself stop thinking about it was with me and Dr. Ali just in one of the shopping centers, and we were looking at food, and I told him, Dr. Ali, did you remember in October when I told you that I had only 3 meals over a week, and now we have everything? That's wrong. That's like taking someone from hell, from the lowest degrees of hell, to heaven all of a sudden. You need time to process it. You need time to realize that you're an island. I'm just telling myself all the time, just wake me up. I'm in a dream. So there is an error here in the whole equation. And the error is that people can continue their lives while there's a Holocaust. People can go ahead with their own entertainment in own lives while the Holocaust, the genocidal Holocaust, has been unleashed and inflicted upon your people. There are some things that are here, some things that are really, really, really like worrying me and irritating me. The boycott products that are everywhere in the markets. People are boycotting, I agree with that, but sometimes you're drinking. When you are drinking a Coca-Cola or a Coke, you're like drinking my blood, my people's blood. I can't really imagine it. It's very disturbing. It's really disturbing. But I don't know what to say. Like the first time being outside Gaza, the first time being without a family, the first time, like, my parents never imagined that I would leave them at any point in their lives. I have a family. I have many things. All of that was just erased because Israel is unleashing terrorism on people, and they are still, until this moment, they're still annoying me. They're still threatening me. So I'm 22 years old. I never did something wrong in my life. I never. The 22 years old people or young men all around the world have a prosperous, have a great life with their families. They're always with them. My family is not safe. I think about them. I'm thinking about them as I'm talking to you. But you probably see Abubakar very hopeful. I'm very hopeful, and I will continue to be very hopeful, and we continue carrying that hope from Gaza, because I promised myself since day one that I would emerge, as I told you during the live streams in Gaza. And as you can hear me very clearly now, right now, without any cuts, without any break-in, that Abubakar really needs time. He's a human being in there, and I can't stop thinking about my family, about my people. I have to do something. I really have to do something. But my heart is there. My body is here. I'm not safe. I'm safe with my family. I want to keep reiterating this, which is, I want to live in a grave in Gaza, but not to live in a castle elsewhere across the globe. So for me, the soil of Gaza is what has really stayed with me and will stay with me and will stay with me forever. That's my promise to my homeland and to everyone who's listening to me right now.
I want to say something to you in front of everyone here, which is that we are all so proud of you. We're proud of all the other journalists in Gaza. I told you many times that, every single time you went out to report could have been your last day. Even sleeping in your home could have been your last day. And so we're all so happy that you made it out. Everyone deserves to be safe. You should never feel guilty for surviving. I know your heart is always with your family. All day long when I've been with you, you're communicating with them as often as you can. Your mind is never away from them. I mean, I've seen that with my own eyes. And they find joy, even living in a genocide, they find moments of joy and pride when they see you doing what you do, when they see you just enjoying fresh, clean air and safety and seeing the greenery. That lifts their hearts as it lifts mine, seeing you enjoy it. And I also know, Abubakar, that you feel very driven to continue to speak, and what you've done, even in the short time in Ireland, has been tremendous. You're like a whirlwind going through Ireland, and your message is reaching far beyond. But you have a mission and a role that you'll need to pursue maybe for many years, and therefore I hope you will, and I hope people will give you the time and the space to slow down a little bit, to take it at your pace, and so that you can be that strong voice for a long time. Because I can see anyone, just like anyone who's come out of this situation, who's survived this Holocaust, And this is true of all those I've met who have come from Gaza and who are now in Ireland, who I've had the privilege to spend time with. Everyone needs time to at least heal to the point where they can be effective for themselves, be healthy and strong for themselves and for their families back home. So I hope you will give yourself that space, and everyone else will give you that space. And you are going to be, you are doing, and you are going to continue to do amazing things. I have no doubt of that.
Well,
we're proud of you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was my honor and privilege to hear that. But as I'm telling you, I'm in the end a human being, and my only weakness is not to be with my family, with my parents. You already know that.
It's a big thing. It's a big thing
for me. Whatever happens, or whatever will happen, as I told you, Palestine cannot be liberated without our blood. We can water it. We talked about the yellow rose many times. The yellow rose will bloom by our blood. The yellow rose will bloom by our sacrifices. That's a promise that I've made for a very long time. That's why I learned English. I was burning my hands by the wax candles, and I was doing everything in my power. I showed you that.
Yeah.
Just to stay for long hours at night because there was no electricity. I made the whole journey, took the risk, and I did everything. And I just left my family, left my heart, just for the case of a country, for the sake of a country that has seen the unbearable. And we are Palestinians together, sitting here, talking to the world. We can't let it go away. We're here for them. We are the fighters. We're the ones who can free it. And whatever it takes, it's going to take our hearts. It's going to take our lives. We're with Palestine all the time.
I want to say one thing, which really, this isn't my first time in Ireland. I've had the chance to spend time here over the years, though it's never enough. And it's been a few years, but I felt so strongly here in Ireland being with you. We've talked so much about the hope that we see in Ireland's present in the activism and the people, in the solidarity from people in this country, which is just really amazing. But I also see a lot of hope in Ireland's history. One of the things that, walking around Dublin, and yesterday we went to outside Dublin a bit, and you see monuments and you see sites that are associated with the 1916 Easter Rising. And of course, that's when the Irish resistance, let's call them the Irish Muqawamah, declared the Irish Republic. But what I was saying to Abubaker is that what we have to recognize about the 1916 Easter Rising is that, strictly speaking, it failed. The British crushed it brutally, and they arrested and executed the leaders of the Easter Rising. James Connolly was executed by the barbaric British in Kilmainham prison in his wheelchair. So strictly speaking, in those terms, it was a failure, but it was the beginning of the end of British rule in Ireland. And within just a few years, within less than a decade, most of Ireland was free of British occupation. So we cannot judge events as we live through them. We can't always see where they're going. And that's one of the things that really came home to me again, being back in Ireland. There's hope in Ireland's history as well as in the incredible energy of its people today.
It's beautiful. Thank you for that reminder. And yeah, I mean, as you were speaking, Abubaker, people in the comments were saying, please take all the time you need. It's going to be a long journey of emotional and spiritual repair, and we're all here for you. And your family, is growing all over the world, and we're all here to support you and care for you in however way we can. So it's so good to see you. And I am so glad that you and Ali have been hanging out and really supporting each other and taking care of each other in Dublin and meeting all these amazing people. Yes. There's always a surprise.
Right there.
Ah, there we go.
We might go outside while there's still some sunshine.
This is perfect.
See how well the tortoise runs.
I love it.
They're gonna be crowned the champions next Sunday. So it's really kudos to Liverpool's fans who have been supporting Palestine over the course of the past 2 years. I'm very happy, and yeah, we're here together. I think it's very emotional, and hopefully with the rest of the team. And but I'd say, like, you know, as I told you, for me, I'm trying to grow up, and thanks for being here. I'm still learning every single day, and I have to do everything. And with you being around, the hope grows every single day, like a yellow rose. So we keep taking that yellow rose with us until Palestine is free. That's the promise, and that's the pledge of every single one in Gaza, every single me and my family. So yeah, I think until we will play football in our hometowns.
Well, go easy on Ali now, because
yeah, of course.
He's not as young as he used to be.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're gonna leak it. We're gonna leak videos very soon. So stay tuned.
All right. So good to see both of you. We'll be in touch very soon, as we always are.
But you forgot to say live from Ireland. You always say live from Gaza.
Well, thank you for being with us live from Ireland, in Dublin, and yeah, and thanks for everything, of course. All right. Take care, guys. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
It's beautiful. Whew. I know. Very emotional. Very emotional.
It's an incredible journey. It's almost unfathomable to compare life outside of Gaza to what he has lived through for his whole life under siege.
He was a toddler when the siege began. I mean, just to think about that and live through, you know, the 2008, 2009 attacks, the 2012 attacks, the 2014 attacks, the 2019 attacks, the 2021 attacks, and then the genocide in 2023. You know, to have that as your only form of reference for the entire world, and then to be whisked away, you know, to relative safety. It's going to take a long time for Abubaker.
He's like so many other Palestinians that he's been dehumanized his whole life. You know, this is a speech one of our other friends from Gaza, Shahid Abu Salama, made not long ago, where she tells the story of how she's been dehumanized from literally the day she was born, you know, by her mother being targeted as she was giving birth. So yeah, there's just generations and generations of Palestinians in the very similar dire circumstances.
But like he said, and like Ali said, and like Frank said, these are the last gasps of Zionism. The Israeli project is going to be dismantled one day, and equality and human dignity will once again come. But it's going to be a very, very bloody journey, and we just have to all hold on as best as we can. And part of that holding on is the work that you're doing every week, Jon Elmer. Tell us about what you're going to be reporting on in the Resistance Report.
So another remarkable complex ambush as soon as Israeli troops moved into Shujaiya which is the neighborhood of our dear friend Rafat, and heart and soul of the resistance. And sure enough, they were hit there. And also we're going to talk about Yemen today, because Yemen's opening of this front in solidarity, in alliance with Gaza, as Frank said off the top of the show, is a statement for the whole world to see. So we'll keep on top of both of those.
Great.
And we'll do that this week.
All right, we'll take it away.
Okay, let's take it away. All right, so you are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I am Jon Elmer. This is the Resistance Report for day 594 of Israel's genocidal war, and I am reporting this on the 22nd of May. Maybe we can start with the maps as usual to get ourselves acclimated. 80%, this is still last week's map. OCHA didn't update this map, but as Nora reported in her excellent newscast off the top of the show, more than 80% of Gaza is now a no-go zone. Khan Yunis, I'll get to Khan Yunis shortly, but evacuation notices all over Khan Yunis and all over the north of the Gaza Strip as well. Israel is carrying out 150 airstrikes a day that they're admitting to. They haven't acknowledged that tempo of airstrikes since December 2023 and January 2024. And again, as you see in everything that you see on your screens, and I know everyone that listens to this sees it on their screens all the time, you're never seeing fighters in these massacre scenes. You're never seeing armed people in these massacre scenes, because Israel's targeting civilians, and the resistance is waiting for the Israelis to advance. And as soon as they do, they are being hit. The Israeli media discourse is calling this stage of the war the Trump plan. But I'm going to give the usual caveat that I always do, in that Israel has a lot of plans, and the people of Palestine, the people of Gaza, and the resistance in Gaza does all their work to undermine those plans. And we know that many of these plans go to die in Gaza because they are defeated. But at this point, Army Radio released a statement the other day about the aid distribution. And again, if you didn't listen to Nora's news report off the top, you should go listen to that clip. It's an excellent report, and she covered some of that in her report. But Army Radio said that the Israeli plan to evacuate the north of Gaza is by creating new humanitarian aid distribution mechanisms to completely empty the north of its population. This is from Army Radio. Out of 4 distribution sites that Israel plans, 3 are in the south, based around the Morag corridor, and one of the 4 is in the south is in the middle areas below the Netzarim corridor, south of the Netzarim corridor. Establishing these humanitarian aid centers, Israel's plan is to allow access for Gaza civilians located in the north to access the food distribution site that's south of Netzarim corridor, south of Wadi Gaza, that separates Gaza City from the middle camps area. The idea of the plan, according to Army Radio, the idea behind establishing the center south of the Netzarim corridor is that anyone who comes from northern Gaza to the distribution center to pick up the only food that there is in Gaza, they will not be allowed to return north of the Netzarim corridor. This will be a, quote, one-way ticket, Army Radio said, effectively compelling the Gaza population to move south of the Netzarim corridor in order to receive food. Israel believes that this will finally empty out the north of its population and contribute to the complete ethnic cleansing of that. Now, we know that these have been Israel's plans all throughout the war, and they have not achieved that in the beginning of the war in December. They asked everyone in North Gaza to leave, and told everybody to leave. And we know that hundreds of thousands, as many as 500,000, never left the north. And I think you'll find that that is the case again this time. People will not be leaving their land. the way that Israel's plans suggest they will. So if we look at the next map, you can see this is the total destruction of the Gaza Strip. This is a map by Sergio Volkmar. It's a remote sensing indexing, bare soil indexing to estimate the soil water content from satellite imagery. So essentially it shows you all of the tilled, destroyed, upturned soil, and you can see from buildings or from agricultural land, you see the destruction of homes, destruction of commercial and industrial buildings, and of course the destruction of the agricultural land. And you can clearly see this, the outline of the Gaza Strip clear from space because of this destruction that we've seen and we've been reporting on for these 594 days. Take a look at the next map. We'll start in the south. This was a map released by the New York Times that decided to cover the situation in Rafah. And you can see that's dotted line is the Morag corridor that I've been reporting on for the last few months. And you can see the destruction on either side. According to the United Nations Protection Cluster, 92% of homes in Rafah have been destroyed. And that is an ongoing process. And Netanyahu's been pretty open about this. He was open about it on March 31st when he said that Hamas will lay down its weapons, its leaders will be allowed to leave. We will see to the general security of the Gaza Strip, and we will allow the realization of the Trump plan for voluntary migration. This is the plan. We are not hiding this, and we are ready to discuss it at any time. So the Israelis again have plans of forcing people to the south, making them go to the south to get the aid that is being delivered through a private mechanism of American and Israeli contractors who are profiting off of these centers. And they're calling this the Rafah model. If we look at the next video, you can see what the Rafah model is about. This is from a video of satellite imagery from 9/7/2, and you can see that this is Eastern Rafah. Last week, I broke down operations in Eastern Rafah, and you can see it just has been completely erased. This is the Rafah model for the Trump plan. Last week, I showed you the Rafah Brigade carrying out a series of operations called the Gates of Hell ambushes, and this is 10 months after the Israelis said that they defeated the Rafah Brigade. They came back a couple months ago and said that they needed to defeat the Rafah Brigade. So we know that these statements from the Israelis are for their domestic audience and to attempt to show military gains in this war, but they have achieved none of their goals. And if you want to reiterate their goals, they're very clear. They were, number one, return the captives through violence. That has failed. Destroy the Qassam brigades. That has failed. They're about the same size as they were when the war started. Destroy the government. They've not been able to do that. We had Asma Nabia on the show last week from the Gaza municipality, showing the heroic work that they are doing. And the number 4 is that Gaza is no longer a threat. And we know that that is not the case. You have an entire generation of people growing up in Gaza knowing that resistance is their only option. Resistance in all different ways, like we talked about on this show all up till now. Resistance of the school kids going back to school, resistance of the doctors rebuilding the hospitals, resistance of the municipality workers who are fixing the water, constantly fixing, rebuilding as the genocide is going on. And that is the resistance across society. If we look at this next slide, number 4 is the evacuation notice of Khan Yunis. So this is a significant evacuation notice pushing people out of Khan Yunis, a significant city and the refugee camp, as well as the 3 or 4 suburb areas outside the farming villages that are out to the east of Khan Yunis. And the Israeli military said that the IDF will launch an unprecedented attack to destroy the capabilities of the resistance in this area. We'll remember that the Israeli military was driven out of Khan Yunis in March of 2024 by a series of spectacular resistance operations that were called the Night of Power ambush that people can go back and look at. But just this massive evacuation of Khan Yunis. And I just wanted to show you this one more the next one, the attacks on the hospitals here. They can't even keep this up to date. This is the World Health Organization's official tally. It was published last week, but just in the week that since it was published, and it only covers up to the 7th of May. What you're looking at your screen, if you're listening, we have 686 attacks on healthcare. 910 people have been killed in those attacks. 1,380 people injured. 122 health facilities have been attacked, and 33 hospitals, and 180 ambulances affected by the 686 attacks. Since this was published, Nasser has been attacked, the Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. The European Gaza Hospital in Khan Yunis has been taken offline. In the north, the Indonesian hospital and Al-Auda hospital have been attacked. Indonesian hospital is out of service now in the last 36 hours, as is Kamal Adwan for the 4th or 5th time during this war that Kamal Adwan has been out of service, but again, they rebuild it. And this is the Israeli military. They had a change of command of their most highly trained special forces, their Flotilla 13. These are their best trained troops. They like to say they're equivalent to the United States Navy SEAL teams. In the second sentence of the accomplishments of the outgoing commander at this handover ceremony, the second sentence said, during the fighting, Flotilla 13 operated in 8 hospitals in the Gaza Strip, such as Shifa, Rantizi, Kamal Adwan, the Indonesian, Nasser, and Al-Amal. So this is the Israeli military special forces bragging in their accomplishments of sacking these hospitals that have been multiple times rebuilt by the Palestinians. So I just wanted to bring that up, bring that to your attention. We will move now to the north. In this next map, you'll see the Shujaiya neighborhood. This is where we're going to be focusing on. This is a map from 2012, but I want you to see in the bottom, you can see in the center Gaza City and the old city, and then you see Shujaiya is to the east of that. And if you look along the pink buffer zone, which was the buffer zone going back a decade and a half, you'll see Al-Muntar Hill, and that is the hill that overlooks Gaza City. It's a key strategic location going back thousands of years of warfare in the Gaza Strip, and you can see it on the map there, and that's what we are going to be focusing on today. Just to set up Shujaiya, it is the birthplace of the Qassam Brigades, and it is also the spark, the area where the spark was lit for the first Intifada after breaking out of Israeli prison inside Gaza. Islamic Jihad fighters battled with the Israeli military in Shujaiya and sparked the fire in Gaza that would become a few weeks later the first Intifada. And in 2014, Shujaiya was famous for essentially repelling the Israeli ground invasion during Operation Protective Edge, when a convoy, the first convoy of the ground invasion by the Israelis, was met by Qassam fighters in Shujaiya. Their most formidable battalion is in Shujaiya, and they met them and destroyed the convoy. They led to the death of 16 soldiers, 56 were wounded, and the Israeli military withdrew after 48 hours of pitched battle, tunnel-borne battle. The Israeli military withdrew and shelled Shujaiya, creating, up till then, the worst massacre in the history of the conflict. Of course, this war has put all of those, has dwarfed all of those previous understandings of massacres. We have daily massacres that are at that rate now, but you can see Al-Muntar Hill there. It's 1.5 kilometers from the Nahal Oz base. Nahal Oz is the main base that was attacked on the morning of October 7th, and it was a key pillar when it was overran of collapsing the Gaza division. There's been a number of operations in Shujaiya this week as the Israelis move inch beyond Al-Muntar Hill that you can see there. They're not even in Shujaiya yet, and they're already being hit with significant ambushes, which include Saraya al-Quds on Tuesday, a return to sender operation using a 2,000-pound unexploded Israeli bomb and detonating it against an Israeli convoy. But the operations that we're going to focus on today are it's a series of ambush. It's an ambush by Qassam that lasted multiple hours, and is called the Lions of Muntar ambush. And we watched also the first operations after the ceasefire were on Al-Muntar Hill. We remember when 𝐓𝐡𝐞 sniped soldiers on Muntar Hill. So they're getting hit before they're even moving into 𝐄𝐥𝐝𝐈. So we'll start with that operation with this next slide. The Israeli military and army radio, they described this as the fiercest battle since the ceasefire was collapsed by Israel. They reneged on the ceasefire. The Israeli military talked about 5 cells appearing from tunnels all around them throughout the course of a 2.5-hour battle. And it was a multi-layered counter ambush because as the commander here is setting it up, the Israeli forces moved in to set up an ambush, and they were spotted by 𝐓𝐡𝐞, which we can see in this next slide. You can see the surveillance. They've used pictorials here. This is the first time that we have seen 𝐓𝐡𝐞 use this because parts of this operation were not on film, but they showed us how this worked. We're looking at a pictorial here of a 𝐓𝐡𝐞 fighter hiding in the rubble, watching Israeli troops arrive at to set up an ambush. They're arriving in the middle of the night, and 𝐓𝐡𝐞 in the rubble. We have a fighter here watching and surveilling them entering this position. So they discovered the infiltration of the Israeli military and Hamas border police undercover Misdaravim. These are the undercovers that dress like Palestinians that were moving into this position. The commander opened the video by saying that the Israelis advanced at night and infiltrated into one of the houses in the 𝐄𝐥𝐝𝐈 neighborhood. Thanks to the vigilance of our fighters, this infiltration was spotted and ambushed the next day. According to Army radio, they were setting up this ambush at this site. If we look at the next slide, this is the ambush scene. Again, another pictorial showing the zero distance ambush. There was immediately a soldier from the Hamas. The undercover soldier was immediately killed, according to the Israeli probe. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 ambushed this site the next day at 4:40 p.m., tipping off an almost 2.5-hour battle that during the exchange of fire, the Hamas undercover was killed, and the rest of this operation, the next 2.5 hours, are effectively the attempt to recover this counter ambush that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 pulled off. If we look at the next one, you can see the key factor was hitting from zero distance, ambushing the building where the soldiers were in, but then also, as we've seen throughout this war, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 cutting off the reinforcements. And that's what we're seeing here. We have a pictorial of 3 𝐓𝐡𝐞 squad, 3-man squad with the Yassins and small arms fire. This happened 20 minutes after the initial ambush. This is the first recovery troops, and they were immediately hit, which we can see in this next video. They were immediately hit by 𝐓𝐡𝐞 fighters that were set up in position for this ambush. We can see on the screen here the Humvee, open top Humvee being hit by a Yassin strike. The strike is from the ground floor, and we're watching this from a cameraman who's up in a building. So it's a pretty good angle of that shot. The first missile, according to the Israelis, hit the Hummer, and 3 were seriously wounded in that Hummer hit. If the next slide we see is the tank comes after the Humvee. This is now stretching from 15 minutes to an hour, these 2 tank operations. And you can see again another pictorial to describe this section. But if we go to the next slide, we also have video of this from the operation. And again, this was just moments later. You can see the Merkava tank there getting hit from the ground floor, from the ground level again, and the fighter filming it. It's slowed down here the second time. You can see it's a clean shot, no active protection system deployment. The Israelis said that at least 3 were wounded inside that tank. So you can see the efficacy of the Yassins by cross-referencing it with the Israeli reports. This next one is the second tank that gets hit, number 13. They're showing us here in the pictorial cutting off the reinforcements, and we're going to see this from two cameras. This is the first camera that we're seeing from the window, and a second camera. So they've got multiple cameras and multiple cameramen on this operation. This was half an hour later that this tank was hit, and again, 3 wounded and 1 soldier killed inside that tank. The tank commander, according to the Israelis, the tank commander was killed the platoon commander was killed in this Yasin strike, and the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 report on it. So at this point, there's now 2 dead and 6 wounded in this fierce counter ambush that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 is operating, and the Israelis are unable to extract their wounded because they're continually being hit. So this is another pictorial of the tank, because 𝐓𝐡𝐞 describes this part of the operation. You can see the tank commander in this pictorial with his head outside of the turret, which we've seen them riding outside the turret before. And because this is now an hour and a half after the initial operation, perhaps they believed it was over. But we can see on the next slide that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 says that our Mujahideen carried out a heroic sniper operation from a house, which resulted in hitting the head of the soldier who was riding in the tank. So that is a sniper operation, Al Ghul sniper operation as part of this ambush. And the next slide, you can see the safe house that the Israelis retreated to is under attack here by 𝐓𝐡𝐞 fighters. There's this audio track through this entire video is gunfire on this Israeli position. So in the house across the way, where they try to take cover, another 𝐓𝐡𝐞 cell is on top of that. So these are why you hear in this Israeli investigation that went into this, because this story was a story in Israel. I reported on this ambush a few weeks back. This was from the 25th of April, because it was a big story in Israel, and they had to explain why there was 6 medevac helicopters for this one operation. And they had to explain the border police role in it. So we got a lot more information than we normally do out of Israeli field reports to corroborate the evidence from both sides. So a remarkable operation, the Lions of Muntar, and an indication of if the Israelis move forward into the built-up areas where they are not yet doing, that they will hit operations like this. And the next one is a video from Sarai al-Quds sending salutes to Yemen. We see them attaching stickers here to Gaza-made rockets. The first sticker says, "Dedicated to the free and brave people of Yemen." The second one is a tribute to the commander of the Jenin brigades, Nora Abu Taha, who was killed the Friday before this video was made earlier this week. So a week ago Friday, he was assassinated in Nablus, but he's the commander of the Jenin brigades. We see them on the wall. You see Abu Hamza on the wall there, and you see Nur Batawi on the wall, and you saw Yahya Sari, who is the spokesperson for the Yemeni armed forces, on the wall there. And the voiceover on this says, "We salute the Yemeni people in all arenas, especially those in Al Sabain Square, whose voices echoed with strength." That's the place where the 1,000,000-person marches were every Friday. And the voiceover says, also referring to something that we heard Abu Hamza say before he was assassinated, that, quote, "We extend our salutations to the great leader Abdul Malik Badruddin al-Houthi, whose detailed speeches about the battle, its course, and its consequences, we, as the Palestinian resistance, listen to attentively, as if he were present with us on the front lines at the heart of the confrontation in Gaza, in a sincere expression of authenticity and Arab identity," they say about al-Houthi's speeches. And we also extend and salute the proud mountain voice of Yahya Sari, who is the spokesperson for the Yemeni armed forces. So tributes back and forth between the resistance factions in Yemen and in Gaza. And Abdul Malik al-Houthi, in his his regular weekly Thursday speech, said to the crowds in Al-Sabain Square, said, "In response to the message from the fighters of the Al-Quds brigades, we convey on behalf of ourselves, our people, and the fellow fighters of the armed forces abundant greetings, and we ask that God grant you and all your fighters in the Gaza Strip support, victory, and steadfastness." So communications, like we always see from the resistance, communications to their own people, communications to their fighters, communications to the other factions, and communications to the outside world, resistance in the outside world. So so that is the resistance report for this week from Gaza. We are going to turn now to Yemen. You are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I am Jon Elmer. This is the Resistance Report for day 594. This is the second part of the Resistance Report, in which I will focus on Yemen. If we take a look at the first map, it's been 2 weeks since the since the American operation abruptly ended. The war on Yemen abruptly ended, and we have seen the Yemeni armed forces increase their attacks against Israel since the United States has left this war. 18 ballistic missile and drone attacks in the past 2 weeks targeting Ben Gurion Airport as part of the aerial blockade that the Yemeni armed forces are trying to impose on the Israeli economy in solidarity with Gaza, including one missile attack today. If we look at the next one, it's this missile ranges, and this is going to be relevant for this resistance report on Yemen, because you can see the bands cover beyond. They go all the way to Beirut, and the reason why I want to show that this time is because, as I will point out later in the show, the Yemenis are expanding their targeting of Israel to include the Mediterranean port of Haifa. So the missile range is relevant this week. As we see in this next slide, this is from the Yemeni Armed Forces announcement about the blockade of the Haifa port. It says, in response to the Israeli enemy's brutal escalation against our brothers and their families in Gaza, committing dozens of massacres each day, and in response to the continuing siege and starvation, the enemy's refusal to halt its aggression and to lift the blockade, the Yemeni armed forces have decided to carry out the leadership's directives and begin enforcing a naval blockade on Haifa port. Accordingly, we will notify all companies whose vessels are currently in that port or bound for that port. For the moment that this statement is issued, Haifa port has entered our bank of targets, and they must treat what is stated here and in any future notices with the utmost seriousness. The decision follows our successful blockade of the Eilat port, which has long since ceased operations. So the Haifa port now follows the aerial blockade that the Yemenis put on, and we haven't reported on Yemen in the last 2 weeks, so I wanted to bring you this video. The next one, number 23 here, shows the Yemeni aerial blockade video that was released for the Israelis to see. The Yemeni armed forces announced the aerial blockade of Israel earlier this month, in the days after the U.S. announced that they were stopping their attacks on Yemen in early May. This has a voiceover of Brigadier General Yahya Sari, the spokesperson, and says, in response to Israeli aggression in response to the Israeli escalation by the decision to expand the massive ground operation in Gaza, the Yemeni armed forces announced that we will work to impose a complete aerial blockade of the Israeli enemy. The decision to ban air navigation to the airports of occupied Palestine, as well as to ban the passage of Israeli ships in the Red and Arabian Seas, and in addition to the support operations, will continue until the aggression on Gaza stops and the siege is lifted. In that video, you saw Israel's 3 international airports, Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Eilat. That's Ramon Airport in the south of Israel. So in this next scene, you can see the evacuation notices. These are evacuation notices that the Yemenis are issuing in the same way the Israelis do it. This evacuation notice went along with a statement from the Yemeni armed forces that said, the evacuation warning has been issued to Ben Gurion Airport. In the coming hours, the Yemeni armed forces will bomb Ben Gurion Airport and other Israeli airports due to the recent escalation against Gaza and the aggression against Yemen, because Israel attacked Yemen this past week for the 8th time since the war began and destroyed the Sana'a airport. Israel said that the Sana'a airport would be out of order for months. It was out of order for less than 10 days. The Yemenis rebuilt, and planes have been landing there after 10 days of it being destroyed, and they have been for a number of days since then. The warning says that all remaining airlines and those present at the airport, especially foreigners, are requested to leave immediately for their own safety. And they have backed this up, as we can see in this next slide. These Yemeni missile strikes have been a daily occurrence for Israel, sending off sirens that have 2+ million people running to shelters. And they have been doing this with supreme confidence. When Trump was in Saudi Arabia last week, the Yemenis fired 2 ballistic missiles over his head when he was speaking in Saudi Arabia as part of their daily attacks, virtually daily, sometimes twice in a day, attacks against Israel. And late last week, we saw one of these attacks where 4 interceptors were fired at a single ballistic missile. So those are Arrow 3 interceptors. That's more than $10 million in interceptors that we hadn't seen the interceptors launched in quite that way. So we know that they're using tens of millions of dollars for every strike. We also know that the THAAD system that the United States moved into Israel to protect Israel, that they're launching $12 to $15 million for a single interceptor. And last week, the THAAD missile system launched multiple missiles and missed with both of them on 2 separate occasions. So tens of millions of dollars and each instance being burned on these Yemeni strikes. And as I said, Israel attacked Sana'a airport and it was quickly rebuilt. Number 26 here shows you the USS Truman. This is the aircraft carrier strike group that was attacking Yemen. The Yemeni forces targeted these carrier groups, according to Abdelmalek al-Houthi, including the USS Truman and its warships, and the USS Vinson, who came recently with more than 131 operations, including 253 anti-ship ballistic missiles, anti-ship cruise missiles, and drones, according to Abdelmalek al-Houthi in his speech on Thursday. And the Admiral James Kilby, who is the acting chief of U.S. naval operations, said that the Truman conducted 670 airstrikes from its planes on shore in Yemen, and they intercepted 160 enemy, in this case, Yemeni drones and missiles during its 5 months it spent in the Red Sea. The New York Times recently reported on this operation based on Pentagon officials that they spoke to, that said that they had burned through more than $1 billion in armaments protecting the carriers and their warships in the first 30 days alone of the 52-day operation, suggesting they spent more than $1.5 billion on vertical launch missiles to protect the aircraft carrier strike group from Yemeni drones and missiles. That's, of course, on top of the 8 MQ-9 Reaper drones that were lost just in that window of time. We know that more than 24 have been lost since 2017, but in that window of time of the American operation, 8 MQ-9 Reaper drones were downed, 30 million apiece, plus we know about the 2 FA-18 Super Hornets that were lost, $70 million jets that were lost overboard while the ship, the USS Truman aircraft carrier, was carrying out evasive maneuvers to get out of the way of Yemeni drones and missiles. And that was the 3rd F-18 that was lost on the Truman's deployment that time. So after Trump said that they were not going to after Trump said to the Navy to stand down, they really did. They basically turned heel and headed home. And like I reported over the past number of weeks, that Truman was supposed to head home anyway. So they were going to be limping home with 3 less jets and $1.5 billion of vertical launch missile defense capabilities expended. But this is here the confirmation from the Sentinel-2 satellite of the USS Truman and its escort vessels on its way out through the Suez Canal, through the north and into the Mediterranean, which you can see in this next slide. In the Mediterranean, the Central Command, the President of the United States promised to annihilate completely, that is a quote unquote, Ansar Allah. Clearly, that did not happen in any way, shape, or form. CENTCOM said that they carried out strikes on 11,000 plus targets. Abdul Malik al-Houthi said that there was 1,712 U.S. strikes in total. CENTCOM says targets, so sometimes targets are hit with multiple strikes. That accounts for the difference in the two numbers. And like I said, they lost all of their hardware. And that is the carrier strike group steaming through the Mediterranean on its way back home to the United States. And we can see in this next slide the U.S. Air Force B-2 bombers, which was half of the B-2 bomber fleet that was sent to Diego Garcia to also bomb Yemen. That is them arriving back in Missouri in the United States. That happened earlier this week. So all the B-2 bombers are gone from the American operation. And as Israel pointed out this week, they're on their own to fight the Yemeni threat on their own. The Americans are out of this battle as of now. So that is the resistance report on Yemen for day 594.
Thank you so much, Jon. So much happening. I mean, the continuation of, I think it was more than 80% of all of Gaza is now under either like full military occupation or forced displacement orders. And like you said, the plan in Gaza for the Israelis, and the U.S. Is to force people possibly to the south. What do we know about what? There are these images coming out over the last week of not just the kind of wide-scale bulldozing of entire city blocks in already decimated Rafah, but now they're bringing in machines that pulverize the rubble. So really this kind of second stage of real erasure of entire cities, of people's entire lives. What I don't know, what can we say about these ethnic cleansing plans at the moment?
Well, that pulverizing is to make, because the destruction is so total in Rafah, they can't set up these aid distribution sites without smashing more to have a flattened area that people can access, because the roads are all they're all destroyed. The houses, every building is destroyed. There's rubble all over. And so if this Trump plan is to be realized, they have to do essentially bulldozing of the already pulverized land in order to create these corridors that will allow people to set up in Rafah, which is what their intention. The plan is to have people set up near the aid, pick up the aid. Only a certain group of people will be allowed to pick up the aid. This is a dystopian fantasy that these Israeli planners have. The idea is then that they would set up camps in Rafah, and people who want
concentration camps.
More concentrated concentration camps than Gaza, and that people will be then, given the option of voluntary, the most misnomer for the ethnic cleansing. And so we're seeing those plans by the Israelis. They're doing it through two private companies, an American mercenary company that's involved with Israeli businessmen who are going to be profiting off of this, but it's not set up yet. And so Netanyahu, like you reported in your news report, Netanyahu's getting pressure to get aid in, and he wanted the aid that got in to be under this logistical mechanism, but it's not in place yet. And so that's part of the reason why the aid shipments are being held at the border, because Israel doesn't want these shipments to go to the internationally recognized aid organizations who are able
like
to
the
distribute.
United Nations and
The
and
people
the
who've been doing it
WHO.
for the entire time, and the local Palestinians who know how to hand out these and have distribution sites. There's more than 400 distribution sites in Gaza, even now, where, like you say, 80% is off no-go zone. There's still 400 aid distribution sites, and Israel wants to turn that into 4. So it is a really dark point in this really dark period, and it's not totally clear how this is going to go going forward, because people can't go on a 40-kilometer march from the north with having not eaten anything. Children's teeth are falling out, hairs falling out of their heads of children. You're not having children walking 35 kilometers to Rafah in order to get these food handouts. So this is just a really devastating moment. And the fact that the Americans are letting this happen when Netanyahu, like you reported, is very clear in saying he's getting pressure from the Americans to get aid in, because they don't
it's not even to get aid in, it's to stop the flow of footage.
Yeah, they don't want to see the
emaciated children. They don't want to see the footage anymore. So it's not even about the actual distribution of aid. It's just it's really not good optics.
Yeah. And it's dark because this is day 80. It's more than day 80 of this siege. And Israel has tried this siege multiple times throughout the war. Remember, the war began with it when Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, said, I'm not going to repeat what he said, but insulted Palestinians and said that there would be no food, no water, no nothing getting into Gaza. And the international community pushed back on that, such as they are, and Israel stopped it. And then there was multiple times throughout when there was the general's plan that was talked about. They limited aid to the north, but again, presumably it's the Americans are stepping in and saying, you're going to put us all in the Hague for this kind of behavior.
And that can be the only, right, nothing changes, and Palestinians can't eat condemnations and statements.
No.
And that's why we're seeing this very curiously timed wave of condemnations from Europeans, mostly European leaders. Asa, what can you say about the utility of these kinds of condemnations? What significance is the timing right now? Is it because Starmer and Lammy, for example, in the UK, don't want to end up in the Hague and they see the writing on the wall? What's this?
Absolutely. I think that's it in a nutshell, really. So part of this pressure exactly that we're talking about, is coming from the European countries, and they want to appear, because Israel is so unpopular everywhere now, really. Not just in Ireland, as this has been a very Irish episode of the live stream, I'm happy to say. But the reality is the Palestinian cause is not as strongly supported in other countries in Europe. But nonetheless, Israel is still unpopular everywhere, really. Yeah. This is the reality. And so even the national governments in Europe are coming under pressure from their populations to at least appear or to be doing something, do something about it, right? And so what we've seen this week is more of that. And we've got this, it was reported this week in Britain, for example, that the foreign minister, as you said, David Lammy, stood up in Parliament and he condemned Israel's refusal to allow thousands of aid trucks access to starving Palestinians. This is what this Guardian article reports. And said Israel's treatment of Palestinians was, quote, an affront to the values of the British people. And in well, it may be true, but it's not an affront to the values of the British government of the current day, or really any other day. And he continued, quote, is incompatible with the principles that underpin the UK-Israel bilateral relationship. I think that's certainly not true. But he did say that he was suspending these. He put some very, very sort of tokenistic measures in place, essentially, suspending these trade talks. Yeah. And the Guardian article continued, at the same time, EU foreign ministers meeting in Brussels decided to review the bloc's trade agreement with Israel after a request from the Dutch foreign minister. 17 out of 27 states backed the move. The EU is Israel's biggest trading partner. And then further down in the article, it says that David Lammy, again, the foreign minister of Britain, under the prime minister that you mentioned, Keir Starmer, David Lammy also imposed sanctions on a further 3 Israeli settlers and 4 entities on the West Bank, including the veteran settler extremist Daniela Weiss, the head of the Nakhala movement, who featured in Louis Theroux's recent documentary, The Settlers. I mean, I think that just says so much. That, I mean, it's actually a good, in my view, it's a fairly good documentary, Louis Theroux's documentary, The Settlers, and he's talking to these settler leaders in the West Bank. You know, I mean, I think for a lot of our viewers, it won't be...
it's nothing new.
Exactly. Yeah, and my impression of watching it was very much like, well, you know, in 20 years of visiting Palestine and covering this issue in one way or another, it's depressing how little has changed. Nonetheless, it was a documentary which was on mainstream TV on the BBC in Britain, and you know, it probably would have had informed some people of the sheer fanaticism of settler leaders like Daniela Weiss just openly saying, you know, they need to go and this is all Jewish land and so on and so forth, the kind of fanaticism we know about. But like sanctioning her, I mean, great, sanction her, but that's not the issue. This is a real tokenistic measure, right? Because
it's not going to stop the genocide.
Exactly. She is more of a symptom. Like she's talking even in that documentary, she's talking about how she has influence on the Israeli government, right? And that she has a hotline to Netanyahu's advisors. So sanction Netanyahu. Really, you know, bring Netanyahu to, you know, don't expel the Israeli ambassador, arrest the Israeli ambassador. You know, that's the kind of thing that we really need. And so this does seem to me that it seems to be more of David Lammy and Keir Starmer, you know, perhaps with thinking, and this relates to what Frank was saying about the metaphor of, you know, cutting off the gangrenous limb. Is Israel starting to, you know, imperialists in the West starting to see Israel as more of a liability, and are they beginning to have one eye on, well, maybe we could be prosecuted for this, for war crimes, for our involvement in this, and are they trying to distance themselves now? And Tamara, if you could put on that thank you very much. This just really shows exactly what I'm talking about here. This is from The National, which is the pro-independence newspaper in Scotland, which actually does some good journalism, unlike the British press. And they, you know, they've done some good reporting on this issue, and they showed, you know, hours after David Lammy came into Parliament and is putting these token measures in place, the actual real, not just complicity, but involvement, direct involvement of the British state and the British military in the genocide, in the Gaza Strip, in the Holocaust of our times, is active and involved and still ongoing. UK spy plane flew over Gaza hours after his criticism in Parliament, and this is, you know, when we've had Matt Kennard, the brilliant journalist on in the past, who's done so much to expose the British military's involvement in providing intelligence and helping them to wipe out so many Palestinians in the Gaza Strip.
I mean, and this is also, do you want to say anything about the UK trade talks suspension? What significance does that hold? What does that mean, suspending trade talks? I mean, it sounds like it's one of these other kind of maneuvers of like kicking the can down the road. We're going to have meetings to have a conference, to have another meeting about maybe possibly suspending trade talks as the genocide grinds on.
And it's suspending as well. It's like the measures that the British government took last year, where they said that they were suspending some arms licenses to Israel, where and actually the vast majority of them was still in place, including especially the British involvement in the F-35 program. And more recent reporting actually has shown that even those licenses they said they were ending are in practice not ending. They're still ongoing. So this is, to use a cliche, but it's still an accurate cliche, perfidious Albion all over again. And the Labour governments especially are really adept at that. And even like these they're trying to say this is detrimental to the Israeli-British relationship and all of that. Even that is not going to help them, because the Israeli response has been fanatical. An Israeli foreign ministry spokesperson accused Britain of, quote, an anti-Israel obsession, and other Israeli ministers have been saying that, trying to basically say that Keir Starmer is anti-Semitic. So, like, as much as he's done to drive the left out of the Labour Party and to, fanatically purge Jeremy Corbyn and people like him from the Labour Party on the pretext of this fabricated anti-Semitism crisis, even he is still being accused of anti-Semitism. So, it's really pretty depressing situation. On the plus side, I mean, I think the more optimistic thing we could say is it's kind of one of these morbid symptoms, I suppose, that Frank was talking about earlier in the stream, where it kind of shows that there are kind of the rats deserting the sinking ship, as it were. And if we can take some optimism of it out of it, it's that. I would say there was another example of this as well this week with a list of British journalists tweeting out this statement addressed to the Israeli government and to the Egyptian government, calling for journalists to be allowed access to international journalists to be allowed access to the Gaza Strip. Of course, something we would agree with, but I mean, I just found this disgustingly hypocritical because, and especially if you see the names on this list, Robert Preston, who was in this, who posted this out, he's a mainstream news journalist in Britain, who, so 18 months of genocide, probably hundreds of thousands of Palestinians killed or starved to death by now, or dying through deliberately denied medical access. Almost certainly hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, in my view, have been killed in this course of this genocide. 18 months on, and only now are these mainstream British journalists calling for access to the Gaza Strip. I mean,
and these same journalists have not been raising the alarm about the 220 Palestinian journalists who have been assassinated by Israeli forces over the last 18, 19 months.
Yeah.
So, complete disregard for their work, much of which, like including the journalist who was assassinated last week in his hospital bed at Nasser Medical Complex, Hassan Aslaya. Hassan's footage was being used by The Guardian, by the BBC, by the New York Times, by Sky News. None of those journalists, I didn't see a peep raised
I mean,
by them. But they want access to Gaza. Again, the dehumanization of Palestinians, the complete ignoring the work, the heroic work that these Palestinian journalists are doing every day, putting their lives on the line. But in true European fashion, they're not as valuable as the lives of the white European journalists.
Yeah, 100%. Like it's really disgusting. And if we could go back to that last tweet tomorrow, like the names on this list, like the statement, if you read it, is couched in these terms of we're all Jewish journalists and we're calling on. They actually say the Jewish state to open access to us. But you read the names, like some of the names are the most disgusting, rabidly Zionist, anti-Palestinian journalists who, again, are trying to save face because they know. I think that probably some of them know in their heart of hearts what Frank said earlier, that Zionism is going down, that the project of this supremacist state is going down, and they're trying to sort of say, well, I did this. Well, it's too late. Like the blood is on your hands now. This is disgusting. And one of the examples mentioned here in this tweet, Sabrina Miller, who we reported on in the past, who was a fanatically anti-Palestinian activist when she was at university a few years ago, and she's nepotized her way into the mainstream British media, or failed up into the mainstream British media, now working for the rapidly right-wing Daily Mail. She's signed this, and this and we've reported on the past on the academic David Miller, who she had a key role in purging from Bristol University, and this tweet on the screen is from the Dr. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿, who's a lecturer at Birkbeck University of London, and he says in this tweet, Sabrina Miller has been an Israeli propaganda. He's also responding to the Robert Preston statement about access for journalists to Gaza. And 𝐓𝐡𝐞 says, Sabrina Miller has been an Israeli propagandist through and through. She's written several articles about me that led to a flurry of death threats and racist attacks. My class was moved off campus to protect students. It triggered a 6-month investigation by my employer. Donors then threatened to stop funding the university unless I was sacked. I kept my job. She signed this letter. So, it's disgusting. The pure hypocrisy, double standards and lying is just staggering.
It is. Well, there's always so much to cover, but we're almost at 3 hours. And so I just, there's, I don't know. There's so much to say about everything. Asa, please keep us posted on all of that. Thank you.
Just one last comment on that. I mean, again, it could be optimistic. We try to we try to have that optimism of the will, as well as the pessimism of the intellect. And, it's a sign possibly that some of Israel's strongest supporters are beginning to perhaps desert it, or at least back off very slightly. So the rats could be leaving the sinking ship.
Let's hope Gramsci's always right. Always right. Okay, let's take a look at the website. We have an incredible collection of features and news reports. That's Dave Cronin's recent report up there. Lobby pushes for criminalization of Israel's critics. Very important, his dogged reporting on all things European Union related. Thanks, Dave. I know our colleague Michael Brown also has a new report there about, Michael's dedication and sacrifice that he makes for all of us, watching CNN and MSNBC. So that we don't have to, and that
rather
you don't
him
have
than
to.
me.
Is exactly. It is a sacrifice that I am just so grateful for and in awe of. Thank you, Michael. There's also some new podcasts and more to come. Our incredible features written by our writers in Gaza, as well as really, really important analyses. There is, anyway, just go to our main page, electronicintifada.net, hit the donate now button if you can. Ali's not here today to implore you or thank you for donating and keeping this publication going. But if you have a few spare dollars, go on over to the Donate Now link, and we are ever grateful for your support. And you can always sign up for our email list at the Get Updates link at the top of the page on the left. Subscribe to our YouTube and all the podcast platforms, of course. And thank you, as always, to Tamara Nassar for directing and producing this program, Michael F. Brown for fact-checking, Maureen Claire Murphy, our senior editor, everyone who works at the Electronic Intifada. We're so grateful every day for all of the staff. Ellie Gerzon for social media, Pierre Loisel for producing the shortened 58-minute long audio show that we work on every week together. Thank you, Pierre. Thank you, everyone at the Electronic Intifada, on behalf of myself, Asa, John, Tamara, and Ali, and Abubaker. Thanks, and see you next week.